along the way making Serum, I thought, wow, I think this is really working. I'm actually having fun every time I open up the prototypes. I'm really having fun. Like, I get lost making presets in a sense. And then I thought, I wonder if once this is out, if people will make their first ever bank of patches for a synth. And that happened to a bigger degree than I ever expected. Obviously, the popularity happened to a bigger degree, but I also think that was sort of a feedback loop, that all these people making presets for Serum were, in essence, advertising Serum. And I've never advertised Serum once, short of maybe talking about it on stuff like this.
Welcome to the Mr. Bill podcast. I'm Bill's manager and emergency contact, Anand Harsh, which I get the sense will come in handy as his mountain biking obsession overtakes his kombucha obsession. Bill's guest today is truly a renaissance man. Steve Duda is not only a multi-instrumentalist and vocalist, but he's also a programmer. He worked on Nine Inch Nails' seminal third album, The Fragile, which puts him in the company of Steve Albini, Adrian Belew, and Dr. Dre. He's also a longtime collaborator and friend of last week's guest, deadmau5. But if you're an electronic music producer, and especially if you're in the bass music field, get down on your knees and prepare to worship at the feet of the creator of the VST, Serum. That's right, Steve Duda is your rightful king and daddy. A reminder to pre-order Blanket Dragon's EP Nothing Isn't, which is out this Friday, December 18th, on Bill's Bleagle Beats label. If you're unfamiliar, Bleagle Beats is dedicated to left field glitch and IDM, and it's more than a year and a half of quality releases under its belt. Bill's collab with Blanket Dragon, Life in Reverse, is out now as an instant gratification download if you pre-order the EP. Go to BeleagleBeats.com for more info on the label. Thank you for supporting the show on Patreon. We had a bunch of new patrons join the family recently, so thank you for that. You're going to get early access to episodes, exclusive tutorials, and some weird shit, because we like doing weird shit for the patrons. Finally, please head over to MrBillsTunes.com to sign up to become a hardcore Ableton-ear. You get full access to Bill's project files, access to nearly 30 sample packs, and so much more. All right, here's Bill's double-stuffed, holiday-sized chat with Steve Duda.
Hey, you're listening to the Mr. Bill podcast.
Hey, you're listening to the Mr. Bill podcast.
Hey, you are listening to the Mr. Bill podcast.
Hey, you're 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 listening to the Mr. Bill podcast. Hey, you're listening to the Mr. Bill podcast.
Hey, you're listening to the Mr. Bill podcast.
Hey, you're listening to the Mr. Bill podcast.
Cool, man. Well, yeah, awesome. Glad to have you on the podcast. I was been meaning to get you on for a while now, and yeah, it's just crazy that it happened so quickly. I just hit up Joel and was like, "Hey, what's up with getting Steve on the thing?" And then 30 minutes later, we're doing it.
You got to talk to his agent. I don't know.
Right. Yeah, that's the classic thing. I've actually had that quite a bit with the podcast, where people are like, "Oh, you have to hit up my manager about that," and then it just puts a 6-month wall in between doing the thing.
I'm constantly shocked at how managers just seem to interfere, and basically it seems like they're harming the productivity and progress of their client. You know what I mean? It's like, you'd think they'd have a vested interest to have things happen, but I don't know.
Yeah, I think a lot of it comes down to the look of what you're doing, right? Like, for instance, they don't want their artists doing things that look too cheap or shabby, and they only want people to be punching up, so to speak, I guess.
Yeah, it's sensible. I mean, I'm kind of more of the take of there's no such thing as bad press. I mean, watching Joel in particular, where he would kind of put himself out there talking trash about various things. I mean, calling it as he saw it, really, you know what I mean? But all it ever did was brought attention, you know what I mean? If people are talking about you, then that's kind of what you want, right? So I don't know. I think it's kind of silly to gatekeep that kind of stuff. I don't know. I guess there's a waste of time sort of a thing, but I don't know. At least I'm of the mindset that there's no such thing really as bad press. I mean, I remember there was a thing with Serum and Kanye. I don't know if you remember that or
no, I never heard of this.
Any wind of that, but basically, when was this? Probably like 2016. Joel and I were doing like a bus tour for his label, and so we were in Philadelphia, like sitting in a hotel lobby, and he's like, "Dude, check it out." And he like holds up his phone. I wasn't like on my phone. I was just spacing out, looking at the art on the walls or whatever. And he's like, check it out. And he holds up his phone to me and it says like Pirate Bay, Xfer, you know. And I was like, what's that? Like, what? Yeah, I know my stuff's on Pirate Bay, you know. I can't stop that. He's like, Kanye just tweeted that. And I'm like, what?
Oh, wow.
I pick up my phone and it was something I've never seen where it's like the @ things lit up and I'm just scrolling like pages everywhere. Sue Kanye. I'm like, oh, what in the hell? And then Your Ride's here. We were playing in some club in Philadelphia where there was no Wi-Fi and no cell signal because it was like this basement place. And so I'm sitting there for like hours of this show just wondering, knowing that shit's blowing up, but not, you know, not being able to even like look at it. And so that was pretty funny, but it turned into this just huge thing. And then Joel put himself out there and was sort of like, what the fuck, Kanye? Like, can't afford $200 software, like, or whatever. And then Kanye started digging into Joel and making all these jokes about Mousehead or whatever. And then I was sort of like, man, thanks for like sticking up for me or whatever. He's like, you kidding me? I just gained like 200,000 followers, you know? So, yeah, it doesn't really hurt if people are talking trash about you, especially if it's someone of that level of.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I think anyone, like most artists, would pay to have Kanye talk shit about them on their Twitter.
That's right. I mean, I felt really victimized at the time from the thing, like in the moment of it, because I'm like, you might know this from like Silence, for instance, right? Like it had a username on the interface and then people would like crack the software and put like their crack team name on the software.
Team Air or whatever.
Yeah. And then all these like different DJs and people would do a tutorial or be in the studio and then people would call them out for it.
Oh, yeah. So Carnage, that was like the big one, right? For that?
That's right. I think Avicii, Steve Aoki. I think there was John Dahlback. There was a few people that kind of got in this controversy over it, even though some of them were like, hey, I bought it. I'm just using the crack because I like the weird skin they made or whatever. And so, so I didn't want that with Serum. I was like, I don't want to dissuade people from making tutorials. I don't want like this like faux controversy and then you get dragged into that. So I intentionally left nothing on the interface so that people would, so there would be none of that controversy ultimately. And then little did I know, someone's going to photograph a browser tab of a torrent, So I was like, oh, geez. So I felt like a victim, but then developers were hitting me up, DMing or whatever, dude, congratulations. Like you can't pay for that. And then my web admin hits me up. He's like, dude, jackpot, SEO goldmine. And I'm like, what? He's like, SEO, right? Oh, yeah, search engine optimization. What about it? He's like, well, the way it works is like when reputable websites link to your site, that's what really boosts it. So now Wired and Huffington Post and Engadget and Financial Times of India and all these people were like contacting me for a quote and linking to Xfer records on their pages. So all of a sudden Serum, which of course is a word used for face tonics and the medical stuff, all of a sudden instead of being page 4 on Google, if you type Serum, it became kind of the top thing. So does that matter? I don't know, but it definitely brought a lot of like traffic and attention. And so, yeah, no such thing as bad publicity.
Speaking of like pirated stuff, has there been anything where you've like had to sue anyone, or is that like even a thing you would bother doing or could do, or like how does that work with the whole plugin thing?
I mean, I go way back with music and audio software. And so I, admittedly have downloaded illegal stuff when I was young and broke, you know what I mean? So it's always been something that I kind of feel like I can see both sides of. It's like there's a legality and there's a morality side to it. But I wouldn't sue anyone just based on the letter of the law. I think that's like really... I mean, you'd have to really do something like try to sell Serum, like edit the interface and pretend it's yours or something like that. It would take a lot for me to like want to go to court and deal with lawyers. And obviously there's a lot of payment. I've only once sued someone, and that was for a house I bought where they didn't disclose that it was basically a danger to life and property because it was perched on a hillside in LA. And turns out that they knew stuff about it they didn't tell me. And
like
so
earthquake related stuff probably. Or?
Yeah, there was a letter from the architect who built the house saying, warning, this is a threat to life and property. There were 16 houses, and in the Northridge quake, 12 of them came down. Yours is one of 4 left. A girl died in one of them. Oh, that empty lot next to you? Yeah, that was a twin house.
Damn.
And so they knew this, and then they lied to me about it. Basically, they said, oh, some lady's going to come by. Like after I closed, they're like, oh, some lady's going to come by and say your house isn't safe. But don't worry, your house is perfectly safe. I'm like, what are you talking about? And they're like, oh, this lady, she's crazy. She got drunk and tried to sue us. But just don't worry, your house is safe. And then sure enough, this lady comes by, yoga pants, BMW. She's like, did they give you this letter? I'm like, no, but I kind of knew this was coming. And she was like, I was like, they said that you got drunk and tried to sue them. And she's like, oh, that's funny because I'm a vegetarian and I don't drink. So I just wanted to get out of the whole deal. I was like, take the house back. And they're like, no, we're not going to take the house back. And I was like, all right, well, we're going to court. And so it was a slap on the wrist to them. I just wanted some recourse because of morality thing, partly, right? And I was broke and couldn't address the issue. But yeah, in general, no, suing is like awful. Like I've seen people, be victim of semi-frivolous lawsuits a number of times over the years, people suing artists claim, with like delusion saying, I came up with that song idea and like, trying to sue in like frivolous ways. And
yeah, it seems like the only people who win in court are like the lawyers, right?
Exactly. In fact, I don't even usually do contracts with people. I'm like, let's just have a common understanding here. And if we both agree and have good faith, and hope for the best. Now, obviously, I'm not suggesting people avoid contracts, but for me, what's most important is that people have a common understanding. And if you have common understanding, then the odds that you end up in court, it's kind of unrelated to whether there's wet ink on a document, so I don't know.
Yeah, crazy. I mean, I imagine with something like Serum, a bunch of strange stuff would come up, though, because it's just like such a popular thing at this point in the music industry. For instance, like a new plugin just came out recently. I had the guy on the podcast, Matt Tytel, who makes a synth called Vital, which is quite Serum-like. Like when using Vital, like I noticed a lot of what I was comparing it to when I was first using it was Serum. And I feel like that's kind of what I do with like any new plugin now. I'm kind of like, how is this like Serum?
Right. Well, I think there's a couple decent analogies I could use. One would be like Behringer, right? And they are a hardware company as of date. I guess they're getting into the software world, but they basically go up against the letter of the law in copying, cloning various like hardware devices. And so there's legality and then there's morality, right? And so I think I would never sue anybody or do anything just because I felt it was a legal, valid thing to do. Like I'm not a gatekeeper. I'm not interested in like maximizing money. And I think that's sort of the Behringer way. They're just out to make a bunch of money and skirt the law by just staying right within where they feel legally able to do. And morality matters a lot more to me, right? So I feel like I would almost sue, and hypothetically, if something felt to me to be morally egregious, rather than whether or not I could even win, because it's sort of a matter of principle type thing, right? And so I would only do something, like I said, if someone literally took Serum, hacked the interface, tried to claim it's some plugin that they made, or there's websites that sell cracks, and I think that that's really disgusting, right? Like it's like. It's piracy. The point is to not pay for things. And so when people sell Serum on these, buyfreevsds.com, whatever the hell it's called, whatever they make, I think that that's a little morally egregious, right? It's like profiteering from piracy seems pretty horrible to me. As for like clone, imitation, I think that's all like it's a little bit of a blurred line, right? Between what's inspiration and what's imitation and what's like just direct ripoff kind of a thing. And I don't really feel like I'm the best person to kind of make that sort of decision. You know what I mean? Like, so it's like if I just clearly felt like someone was very clearly just profiteering off of my work, then that's, I think there's a threshold in there. I don't know what it is, but
It's
as for Vital, which I finally got around to checking out, I think like, obviously I wish there was things that were a little less one-to-one with Serum so that people wouldn't just directly compare it to Serum. Because at the end of the day, once I actually used it, I'm like, this really isn't Serum. Like, it has a lot of phase plant ripoff in it too. I kind of feel like on interface stuff, and it feels like sonically, it doesn't really touch Serum. Like is it better in ways? Maybe. Is it worse in ways? To me, maybe, yeah, right. But it's different. Like ultimately, I think the sounds you get out, is there overlap? Of course. But to me, it's sort of like I wouldn't call it direct. It's not taking my code. It has a different quality to it, I think. And so
also like people need access to things, right? It's kind of like with music copyright as well. Like no one can do like a 1-4-5 chord progression and say like you ripped off anyone else, right? Because everyone needs access to that chord progression because it's just such a sort of universally enjoyed thing. And like 4/4 time signature, like no one can like take that from anyone else and call it their property because it's like just such a, again, universally enjoyed thing. So everyone needs like access to certain things. And I think with like plugin design, you could almost say that like with Serum and Vital and Phase Plan and just like the way that these synths are kind of laid out, it's like the access to the layout is almost necessary because there's no real better way as far as we know to lay out a plugin.
Yeah. I mean, there's this sort of imitation is flattery thing, right? When you say like, oh, this person couldn't come up with a better way to do it than the solution that I feel I invented. Everything is, of course, incremental advancements. So I didn't invent too much in Serum, right? Like not, and I wouldn't patent stuff anyway, because I do feel like openness was a part of my whole thing in making Serum. When I was like, I want to make a wavetable synth. Oh, I need some wavetable source because there was no editor and all that yet. And then I started looking at the wavetables out there, and they were all proprietary file formats. And I was like, you know what? Serum's going to have an open file format. So if people want to take Serum wavetables to any other synth, any other usage, even if it's someone making a Me Too product based on Serum, people should have that access. So I wanted to do it really for the users. My whole mindset when it comes to music software is creator focused, right? Like musician centric. That's where I come from. That's my background. And that's my passion. I make this stuff not to make money. Ultimately, it's to empower musicians. So yeah. So, in a plugin that's inspired from Serum, empowering musicians is not a bad thing to me. And in fact, yeah, there's a flattery side to that as well. It's like, oh, wow, you thought my design here, this design element, that design element, you couldn't come up with a better way. So that makes me feel good. Like, that. But what, of course, isn't feel good is if people go that this is the new, like such and such is the new Serum, whether
everyone
it's phase plant or
calls things a Serum killer
pigments,
or whatever.
I think has a lot of Serum influence, Vital, etc. I just, to me, these things are all musical instruments. And unless you can capture some things and replace something for some things. But I think ultimately, to me at least, there's a lot in Serum already, and there's a lot coming for Serum that I think nothing can really hold a candle to. Whether or not that matters for everyone is a different story, or whether or not something else might be superior for someone's type of music is another story. But when I was making Serum, I thought of it like guitars, right? So my thesis, in a sense, was everyone already owns Massive. Like obviously, Serum was influenced in parts from Massive and seeing my peers using Massive. But then I thought, like, everyone already owns Massive. Therefore, I don't need to try to do everything that Massive does. If you are a guitar nut, you're going to get a Telecaster and a Stratocaster and a Les Paul and an acoustic, et cetera, right? Like they all have overlap, but as if you get into it, you're going to kind of want the whole collection. You're going to realize, oh, this is the one I turn to for this, or this is the one I turn to for that. So that's how I like to think of instruments. And ideally, that's how I'd like all instrument designers to think a little bit. It's not just a list of features. If you want every possible feature, you're a reactor or something at a certain point, and now that takes creators into some place they might not want to be. So I think there's room for a lot of stuff that doesn't try to do everything. And I don't think Serum ultimately is just a list of features. It's the quality of the filters. It's all of the things unique to it.
What is it that makes a filter like specifically good?
It's a little subjective. Different people want different things, right? You could do it from a very clinical measurement point of view, or sometimes it's the things that aren't right about it that actually make it good. I mean, it reminds me of like analog gear. A lot of the flaws are actually what make a piece of gear unique in a sense. It's like compressors, right? People don't just want the most clinical, sterile compressor that's just technically doing the thing. They want something that almost imparts a little bit of its own color onto the signal. And there's a time and a place for clinical as well. But so I think that, I think of it a little bit more in that way. And then it reminds me a bit of music as well. Like you could say, I was touring around with Skrillex on this bus tour in 2011, right when I was kind of starting the idea for Serum, or revisiting, because I had the kind of an older wavetable synth back from a decade prior. And Zomboy was just blowing up at that time. And Zomboy obviously had this like Skrillex influenced sound, one could say ripoff, right? And so I was really curious, and I kind of like, just couldn't resist asking Sonny. I was like, what do you think of Zomboy? Because I was just too curious, even though I felt like a troll even asking. But I was like, well, what do you think of Zomboy? And his answer really surprised me, because even though he's a super positive guy, I kind of expected him to be like, oh, well, what can you do or something? But he's like, actually, I really love Zomboy because he's actually doing it well. And I was like, oh my God, I didn't expect that reaction, right? I expected him to be a little bit of a whatever.
To be like, he's taking something from me by doing this or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, Sonny's all love. Like he loves the idea of people,
It's always a weird idea though, right? When somebody does something that's very similar to you, whether it be in music or software or whatever, there is always this like underlying feeling or this knee-jerk reaction feeling of like they're taking something from me by doing this thing. But if you actually like scrutinize that thought a lot, what you really end up coming to, or what I end up coming to anyway, is that like kind of a rising tide raises all ships. Like by having Zomboy also doing this, it like probably started somebody else doing it and so on and so forth. And now it's like Skrillex is at the top of a much bigger pyramid than he was in 2011,
Yeah, and Deadmau5 as well. I mean, he kind of changed the sound of progressive house back when he blew up with Faxing Berlin and Not Exactly and all of his like early tracks that got him some attention. If you were in a club and one of his tracks came in, it just jumped out at you. It was like, are we having a moment kind of a thing? Because everything was like perky 16ths in progressive house back then. And then he came in with these just wall of eighths, right? And it was just like, whoa, something's happening. And then people really started imitating that, but it makes you the originator, right? Like you said, it's sort of like now a new genre is sort of brewing up, and you get to be known as the innovator and king of it in a sense. So I think that happened for Skrillex. Absolutely. He became known as like the originator. And I think there's a lot of respect that gets given by people on who is the one to really like take things in a new direction.
Well, kind of the originator, but as you said before, like progress is always incremental, right? So it's like he kind of took things, I think, from Noisier and, old school Distance and like chest plate records stuff and all that kind of stuff. Yeah.
When I met Sonny, it was like backstage at a show I was doing with Joel, like a BSOD show in the Nokia Theater in LA. And, no idea who he was. I didn't know his band. And he's just this kid, this friend of Tommy Lee, who also came down to do the show. And then and he was just like, yeah, man, I just got Ableton Live. I do rock stuff, but I want to do what you guys do. And I'm just trying to figure out Ableton Live. And I was kind of like, good luck, kid, like no idea. But then his girlfriend and my now wife girlfriend at the time kind of hit it off well. So they exchanged numbers and became friends. And so then he came over to dinner about a year later, and then he was like, yeah, man, can I play, I've been working every day since I met you. Like, can I play you some of my stuff? And I was, that feeling where you're kind of expecting it to be not that great and that you have to kind of like try to just be supportive. So I'm a little begrudgingly like, oh, okay, yeah, sure. Let's listen to your stuff. And instantly I was like, oh, holy cow. Cause it was his My Name is Skrillex EP he had just finished it up. And I was just floored. I think I might have connected him and Joel. I can't remember, but I was totally flabbergasted that this guy went from zero to hero in a year's time, just spending 14 to 18 hours a day doing nothing but Ableton Live. When I originally met him, he's like, I really love like Aphex Twin and I really love like Noisia. And I want to kind of like, go somewhere in between or something, which I was just like, that is so disparate, right? Aphex Twin, and Noisia, just different worlds. But he kind of did that.
Remember that time he posted Flim on his social media and everyone was like, where's the drop?
Yeah. It's
like a really beautiful like piano arm and breaky type Aphex Twin tune, and like all the Skrillex fans are just like, what the fuck is this?
This sucks.
And I think he posted it saying like, this is my favorite electronic tune of all time or something like that. Yeah. Aphex
I love Sonny. I mean, he's like just being able to see that, it's happened a number of times in my life where you see someone with a vision and then when they execute it, I don't know, I don't mean to sound a little cynical, but I don't necessarily believe someone's going to pull it off when people are like, I have this idea. And you're kind of like, cool. But so many times now I've seen people that I wasn't really sure if they were going to pull it off, just like exceed my expectations. Avicii, I met when he was like 16 and a half or 17 and then watched him blow up. I mean, I would kind of mentor him on stuff. Like, he's like, how do I recreate this? And he'd send me a sample and I'm like, vibrato. And he's like, what's that? I'm like, LFO to pitch. And then Zed a little bit. I met him through Sonny. I mean, he had already done like a remix or two we did one for Joel and stuff. So he wasn't a nobody, but he was like, yeah, man, I really want to blend like pop music. Cause I just genuinely love pop music with like EDM, kind of like Swedish House Mafia did with Save the World and all that. And again, I'm like, cool kid, good luck, kind of thing. And then watch him blow up.
How did all these people know you? Like, why were all these people coming to you for the advice on how to make sounds and how to blend music styles and whatnot? Because this is like obviously pre-Serum and whatnot. So.
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I was doing plugins. I may have had like LFOTool and Nerve and stuff, but I think it's largely because of Joel. Just people knew I was associated with him and I was kind of like into the stuff. I can't say exactly who, but I think it's mostly just, everything like connections lead to connections, right? Just like you and I today, like you would have, if you were interested in having me, you would have had to like try to find a way to contact me or hit up Xfer contact form and hope it ends up to me, which actually does quite directly. But you know Joel, and so it was like 30 seconds later, there we are chatting, right? So that's all it ultimately was. Is like I met Avicii through Starkillers, who were some producers in the scene way back then, and they had discovered him online, and so they were just like, this kid's going places kind of a thing. And so credit to Nick from Starkillers for probably being the first American, at least, to like see Tim's talent and recognize that.
Yeah, Avicii was a crazy producer. He definitely like took music or electronic music to like a pretty new place, right? Like I don't think anyone, I don't know, for instance, like when I started electronic music, right, every one of my friends who were basically all metalheads kind of just looked at it as like this joke, and they were just like, oh, this is like some fucking Mario Kart, Gran Turismo menu music shit. Like, what the fuck is that? Like, metal is like where it's at, obviously, and like, why are you even bothering with this stupid fucking toy music? But then it's, somebody like Avicii, I'm sure had like a similar experience. And I mean, at that time, like that's kind of what electronic music was to some degree. It was kind of like this weird, like obscure thing that seemed cheaper than instruments and didn't seem as like polished or full or like as real. But then, yeah, I mean, someone like Avicii comes along and turns it into like something that sounds like even cleaner and bigger and better and more polished and interesting and like poppy than, a lot of instrumental band type music was at the time. kind of took it to a new place.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, Swedish House Mafia might have been a heavy influence on him. It kind of seems like being, and same with Zed, right? Like being able to blend what you hear on the radio with pop music and then blend it with wanting to make something new and feeling like you're, exploring new places. And the club culture, I think Avicii understood even before he was old enough to get in the clubs. He kind of really understood how music serves this party atmosphere in a sense, that it sort of has that function that it's music to dance to and that kind of a thing. So, yeah, he was incredibly prolific. I mean, that was the thing that I noticed about him kind of the most when I first he was still 17, I think, and got in the studio with him and just watched him, belt out 2 tracks in a sitting kind of a thing. So he had this, crazy warp speed on FL Studio and could just get ideas out to the speakers like nobody's business, and arrange and all that, just very, very fast at it. And, decent piano player too. Pretty good. And so I think that, I don't know. It's just, I don't know, circling back to the idea of like just people, it might be biased, but to me, what's most striking is when people really have conviction in something and they believe in themselves. It seems to me that's almost like the identifying trait. If someone was to ask me, what's the common scene? Because I've known Joel also since he was, I think, 17, maybe 18, but he was still living at home and doing the bedroom studio, so to speak, right? And so what was the common thread between all these guys? And it's really just conviction. Like they believed in themselves and they believed it was possible. And then obviously insane amount of hours. Probably other talent factors too, but.
Hold on 1 sec. My Roomba just started trying to vacuum. I'll turn it off.
Nice.
Yeah, apparently every Sunday at this time it likes to do that, and I should probably turn that scheduling off.
That's funny.
Yeah. I agree. I think it's like when somebody just has like unstoppable drive with something, they'll usually kind of make it happen, right? It's sort of like probably you were with Serum or plugin development, right? It's like kind of you just have this feeling that you just want to grind on this every day until you can make sense of it. Otherwise, you're just going to keep leaving the experience of trying like frustrated and incomplete as a human being or whatever.
Absolutely. Yeah, I guess it applies to myself as well. And the funny thing is as you might imagine, I didn't expect to get nearly this far. I picked up C at the age of 30 and I was already, making a living doing rock engineering, mixing records. And I just really picked it up partly just to sort of explore and see how far I could get, sort of like a video game or something, see how far I can get. But I really felt that I would never make a living, honestly. I never even thought I would get like a programmer's salary. That was kind of the dream. I was like, hey, if I want to get out of music or leave LA, I could live anywhere. I could live on the boat in the middle of the ocean and I could set up a little website and have people purchase things. And so I really like that idea because as a tradesman in LA working album to album, you had to be physically present and all of that.
Yeah, what do they call it? A digital vagabond?
Digital vagabond. I like that. Yeah, I guess that's what I wanted to be and now kind of am.
Yeah, there's a lot of those these days that go and like live in places like Bali and Thailand and stuff, places where it's like really beautiful or really cheap and they can just like do their job from anywhere so long as they have an internet connection. Yeah,
that's me. I'm out here in the desert in Joshua Tree and it's just wonderful. For the price of a small shoebox apartment in LA, I have 50 acres and a great house and solar power powering my house and car and everything. And it's the air is great. It's really quiet, beautiful hiking trails, etc. And it's amazing that that's the equivalent price of like a miserable small apartment with noisy neighbors or whatever in the middle of LA. But obviously, a lot of people can't be out in the desert and subside on the live off the internet. But
also personality trait too, right? Like some people just require that level of like human interaction and stuff like that.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I've kept a place in LA, and this whole year, because of COVID, obviously there's less and less reason that you'd want to be in a city. So for me, it's been very easy. My wife is a little more social, so it's been tough for her to be out here full time. But she's back in LA visiting her friends right now. So, yeah, I mean, ideally, best of both worlds. I'm considering moving to Hawaii because, like you said, it's just beautiful, and I can make a living off the internet. And then my wife is a doctor, and so she can make there's a shortage of doctors actually in Hawaii. They need a lot, so she could actually do quite well in medical there. So yeah, I'm thinking about it, or maybe half and half. Maybe keep this place in the desert and kind of go back and forth. But for me personally, I'm at the age where I'm kind of done with clubs and concerts for the most part. Like I don't feel so much benefit from being in a place like Los Angeles. Ultimately, to me, it's my friends there and food options, restaurants. That's about it. Otherwise, I'm kind of done with being in a city.
Yeah, it seems almost to me like LA is kind of a place you go to when you're trying to make it almost. Like it's a good place to be, to connect with a lot of people and make a lot of cool, like do a lot of networking and make a lot of connections basically, so you can get into the places you want to be in to do the kind of work you want to do, because it's kind of like the media hub of the planet, right? So it's kind of like you go there if you want to work in post on films, or if you want to like be an actor, or if you want to be a comedian, or if you want to work on records, like a lot of bands are going there to record, or if you want to whatever, like do any of that sort of media driven stuff like animation or anything like that. Seems like the kind of place to be for that, just in the same way that kind of living in San Francisco where I live is sort of the place to be if you want to work in tech, right?
Yeah, I'm from SF Bay. I grew up in Menlo Park, and I used to live in San Francisco, and it's culturally pretty different. As I'm sure you know, you probably hear a lot of negativity about Southern California up there. At least that's sort of the divide. LA less so. They don't really talk trash about the Bay, but the Bay tends to have a little bit of a negative connotations of LA, and the people and culture, but some of which might have a valid point, but I think a lot of it not so much. I moved. LA is a powerhouse. I mean, it really is. And things happen just by being present. Absolutely. And so it's one of those things where don't knock it till you try it, partly, and then also, if you don't know what you're missing if you're not there, because things happen just at a party, and you're just rubbing elbows with all sorts of different people. And there's a really nice attitude, which is pretty American kind of attitude of, yeah, man, let's shoot the shit. Let's talk. What could we do? What could be? And I love that kind of openness to ideas and collaboration and that kind of a thing. When I moved to LA, I had, I think, $1,000 to my name and 2 phone numbers. And I just knew I wanted to do more work on more records. I just finished a 9 Inch Nails record, and I knew that would be a good calling card, since 9 Inch Nails is known for kind of technology in a sense. And sure enough, those 2 phone numbers led to album after album. And I was, first week in LA, I'm riding around with Tommy Lee and Pam Anderson in the back of their 4x4, which is pretty surreal, like welcome to LA moment. But one of the phone numbers was the producer that was just starting his first solo album, so I jumped on that and did beats and synths for his Methods of Mayhem record. And wow, yeah, it was just 0 to 60 basically for me when I showed up in LA. And like the whole, like, who are you? What do you do? Who do you know? Kind of thing, which exists a bit in LA, can be a little off-putting maybe to some people. But for me, it was just great, right? Because it's like, who are you? What do you do? Who do you know? I'm just like, well, I know nobody. And I just came off a 9 Inch Nails record. Oh, 9 Inch Nails. Oh, wow. Oh, you should meet my friend over here at the party that plays for Jane's Addiction. And all of a sudden you're talking to a guy in Jane's Addiction. And he's like, yeah, man, I'd like to do some like sample stuff. Your Pro Tools? Like, yeah, I want to do like a sample loop CD or something. Like, okay, great. Let's hang out and do that. Right. And so things, I had no trouble finding work. Granted, I did things that I wouldn't want to do again, like tuning vocals for boy bands and stuff like that. But I was just like, hey, if I'm running a computer and music's coming out and that's my job, then to me, that was kind of making it. I didn't have artist goals and dreams. because back then, late 90s or whatever, it really felt more like you had Aphex Twin and people like that, but it really felt like you're either a pop singer or you're a band, like a rock band, and the making it as an electronic artist didn't feel quite viable like it is today. So
yeah, now it's like almost one of the main things, right? It's like more producers than people on the planet. Is what I always say.
Yeah, it can definitely feel that way. And it's super shifted. I mean, it went from back then, it was maybe 20,000 people making music on computers. And then maybe by mid 2000s, it was maybe 40,000 people. And it just like exploded. And now I would guess it's 5 to 10 million, maybe more if you count super casual. But it's hugely different because the bar of entry is gone now with processor speeds. You don't need sound cards and stuff like that. And
yeah, like every computer these days comes with like some sort of audio editing software on it, right? Like even if it's Windows, you still have like some voice recording software, or if it's Apple, you obviously get it stock standard with GarageBand, which is like somewhat capable.
Yeah, I mean, insane power for free. Definitely like.
Or also just like phones and iPads, right? These days there's some crazy apps that you can download and like actually make a tune on like a $5 app.
That's right. It's I don't I don't use phones or iPads or stuff for music making, so it's still a little strange to me. I guess that's where I start feeling old or something, where I'm like I can understand it as a toy, but I can't but there's people seriously using iOS with all these different
there's like
plugins and stuff.
Full feature films that have been shot on iPhone and edited on iPhone these days, and like full albums that have been made on an iPhone and stuff like that. It's pretty incredible.
Yeah, it's amazing. To me, it feels like you're doing it the hard way or something. But
it seems that way.
The tools are impressive. I keep an eye on all music software, so I'm aware of all the various stuff out there for iOS, and it shocks me how much creative, interesting stuff, and strangely not ported to desktop a lot of the time, which I don't fully get. Why they wouldn't take that extra time to make it an audio unit as well, or whatever. But yeah, lots of great stuff. It's just, to me, it feels foreign. Like a lot of people have asked for like Serum on iOS and stuff, and it's not that I couldn't technically. It's just that I don't understand it. As I'm not a user, it's really hard for me I don't have much interest in doing that from a passion point of view, right? It's like I wouldn't be a user.
What is the what would you say, like the barrier? Like, why do some people make a VST and not an audio unit, and like a 32-bit version of the thing, but not a 64-bit, and so on and so forth? Like, what is it that stops developers from doing that?
The different plugin formats are all different code in a sense. And so what people do a lot of the time, myself included, is like when I was starting out, and I've still sort of been stuck in my way, is you download the VST SDK, and that allows you to make a VST plugin. So you're like, okay, let me take the example that they give you and build that. And now you have a gain plugin. And you're like, okay, cool. I don't want it to be gain. Let me make it do something different. Let me add some more knobs. So then you start adding knobs or parameters, whatever. And then, and you change the plugin name from gain to whatever your name is, right? So you're sort of incrementally just modifying this example into existence, into something that's yours. And then at that point you go, okay, ship it, whatever. And then people go, I want an audio unit version. And you're like, well, I don't really want to download the audio unit SDK and then like rebuild copy and paste everything and then have these two projects. So what most people do is if they're in my shoes, is they wrap the audio unit. So wrap the VST into an audio unit format. So basically, it's kind of like having a mini host in a sense. It's just a middle layer that's hosting the VST and then translating that out to the audio unit host with what the audio unit wants. So that's what all of my audio units are. They're wrapped VSTs, and that's very common. And then same with AAX for Pro Tools. It's a wrapped VST again.
Does that mean that they would potentially run slightly worse than the VST because there's like a bridge kind of between them? So like slow things down a little bit, or?
Technically, yes. Technically, it is additional code and there's an additional layer in there. But what we're talking about is like 2 or 3 operations per block call. And so you're talking about something that you could not measure on a CPU meter. It's so insignificant compared to how many numbers that an audio plugin crunches that it's sort of like needle in a haystack in the sort of relative sense of how much overhead it adds. But there is more room for bugs or unique issues to an audio unit. And I always try to push my customers towards VST when they have the choice, like in Ableton Live, but not really because of the overhead or any kind of issues. It's really because if they ever want to collaborate with a Windows user on Live, it actually works to just move your project over if they're VSTs.
Yeah, I had that when I was working on Apple a lot, because one of the things I do a lot is just collaborate so much. And yeah, I just like didn't even have an AU folder when I was working on Mac because of that reason. Like it would just have so many incompatibility issues with collaborators.
Exactly.
Is this the case all the time with AUs? Like, is it that, because I had never really thought about it or knew how this worked, but I assumed that sometimes plugin creators would make an AU and then port it to VST or vice versa. But is it always VST to AU then?
No. So, the most common way that people make plugins is using Juice and JUCE. And so Juice is basically it makes an abstraction for all plugin formats. So you're basically writing an internal thing called audio component, and it's sort of like a generic Juice plugin, if you will. It's just its own format, you could say. And then when you go to hit build, it does the necessary translation. So it might actually, technically have a couple less process calls, like I was mentioning, because there's kind of no wrapping going on. Or you could say it another way, that it's wrapping to everything. It kind of depends on how you look at it. I would actually think Juice has more overhead with translations, knowing what I've seen doing debugging with it and stuff. It's very likes to sort of verify a lot of stuff, right? So you do have like a lot of extra calls. And so performance-wise, I think I'm actually kind of at a lower level, even with wrapping to audio unit. But I think it's actually negligible, and a talented programmer could, probably make it all unimportant. It kind of reminds me of like when you talk about audio engineering and someone says, "Oh, I want to get the best microphone cable," and you're like, "Okay, well, what kind of microphone do you have, and what kind of preamp do you have?" And you're only as great as your weakest link, right? And so I think the weakest link is usually that DSP code, and like finding optimizations there is probably what's going to matter most for performance. And then there's the whole graphics side as well, of course, which similarly, there's ways to optimize and make graphics performance better. And so, yeah, doesn't matter what you would use. It's kind of like Mac versus PC or DAW wars and that kind of a thing. I think it's kind of similar here. It's like, you can't really discuss it unless you start talking about what you're going to thrive in or whatnot. And the weakest link is typically not those sorts of discussions.
Yeah, it makes sense. So how did you become like a talented programmer? Because it seems like you didn't go to school for it, right? And it seems like you didn't, like you came from a sort of rock engineering background and Pro Tools background and stuff like that, and then just got into coding when you were 30. How did you manage to just go from sort of that background with no real like coding experience from the sounds of it to just being able to build one of the most flawless seeming plugins that exists?
Thanks. I don't think it's really my strong suit is actually the programming. So there's a few things. One is that I grew up in Silicon Valley there, and my dad was a researcher, retired now as researcher at Stanford Research Institute. And so they developed the first artificially intelligent robot that was autonomous, very much like your Roomba, in fact, except it was 6 feet tall and had a wire harness, and then it ran in a VAX terminal, which is the size of a warehouse or a garage at least. And they had to program it with punch cards. So he was doing AI autonomous stuff where things could calculate trajectories and learn its environment by bumping into things and all that. So you could look up Shaky the robot, and that was my dad's thing way back.
Look this up now.
So I grew up in a pretty technically literate household. We had Commodore PETs, and I had a Commodore 64. And I have an older brother who's incredibly gifted, and he is more in like network coding and stuff. But basically our conversation right now is running through my brother's software kernels, most likely, because his switches more or less power the internet for anything that needs a lot of bandwidth or a lot of throughput. And so,
oh, wow.
So yeah, my brother is very talented. Was like runner-up state chess champion as a kid.
Oh, wow.
Could solve the Rubik's Cube behind his back while he talks to you. And it was just photographic memory, like very exceptional. And I was a lot more normal, I guess. I mean, I always felt like I have a bit of a, what would you call it? A complex, I guess, about feeling like an idiot because my brother is so exceptional, right? And so you know, that's unfortunately how it is. I think being a younger sibling, especially, I always felt like, oh, I'm just not old enough, and I'll be as smart as him or whatever. But it didn't quite happen, and then hence the getting long hair and dropping out of school and running away from home. I ended up in juvenile hall. I had a pretty messed up childhood in ways, until I realized I can't feel sorry for myself, because it was just, I think it was normally just a teenage emo phase. And I realized, you know what? I can do what I want. I don't have to feel like a victim. And I sort of just, something switched in my brain around 16. And I got a job at a music instrument store the next day after I had this epiphany. And I was like, I can do what I want. I want to do music. And then there was really no looking back until age 30, where I then started reassessing. You know, I haven't stopped and asked myself what I want to do since I was 16 and just had the blinders on, like it's music or bust. And, you know, there's a saying in hip hop, like, you can take the kid from the ghetto, but you can't take the ghetto from the kid. And I kind of think maybe the same with my upbringing. Like, you can take the kid from Silicon Valley, but you can't take Silicon Valley from the kid, right? Like, I just got interested in like not wasting my brain away. I guess ultimately I was hitting record for bands, take 6, and the drummers, you know, do, 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 do. And I just started thinking about the tools and the software that I'm using day in and day out. And I really wanted to do that. So there was a lot of motivation to like challenge myself with something new. And I think I had that upbringing watching my brother sit there and code, and, you know, he would code in Pascal, and then he'd look at the assembler, and then he'd go like, oh, the assembler's not even optimized enough. I'll go right into direct machine code. And he's like 7F3C, like programming like on this direct low level. And I'm, you know, it's well beyond my ability, but I think I did get some osmosis of just like the concept of that you can type and you're not going to break things, and that, you know, and I wouldn't be where I am without Google, right? So it's like weird compiler error or whatever kind of problem. There's like, you know, Stack Overflow. There's these like, and just Google itself. You can generally, someone else has run into that same issue somewhere. So
yeah, I feel like we were saying before about like people just having conviction about doing things. I feel like if you have like the drive to want to do something technical, and so long as you don't have like some sort of, you know, mental disability or learning disability or something like that, and you don't play victim and you're driven to do a thing, you can always Google something and figure it out these days. Like there's no real reason that you can't, right?
Yeah, for the most part. Now, making a synthesizer is a little different than making a Hello World app, right? Like your first little app. There's a pretty big bridge between there. But, you know, it's baby steps, right? So I started with my first released plugin was called Bitmodder, and it was just sort of like Redux and Ableton or whatever. You have bit reduction, sample rate reduction, and then there's a third slider that just multiplied those two signals. So you got kind of like this ring modi other weird thing. And it was just a free audio unit only, if I remember right. And so that was just cutting my teeth on sliders and a user interface panel, and getting to know kind of what's required for something like that. Arguably, Serum is just taking that same idea and just adding and adding and adding. But there's certain parts that are more difficult than others in my mind. One would be filters, and another would be quality, like oscillator quality and that kind of a thing. And so those were the two biggest technical challenges for me with Serum. Otherwise, it's just a really big thing. And then there was just a lot of design decisions that had to happen and get retooled over and over as I realized things were still messy or whatnot. And so, yeah, the hardest parts, I asked for help, because that's, you know, again, the internet kind of came to rescue me. It's like I had friends, especially back being a user and purchasing plugins. I had friends who were developers, so I could hit people up and say, hey, I need some filters, or do you have any filter code that you might give me or sell me or license me? And then similarly with the oscillator on Serum, I was looking at a white paper that this mathematician / plugin developer, Laurent Desoris, who's sort of the brain, or was the brain behind Ohmforce. I think he's left there now, but I hit up Laurent, and I was just like, hey, this white paper is amazing, but I see it's from 1992 or whatever it was. Maybe you have even better code, because even this isn't as good as, say, when you measured it versus massive, it still wasn't quite there. And he was like, oh yeah, no, I think I can beat what's out there with some changes. And so I just paid Ohmforce, I don't know, just a few $1,000s, and had that problem solved. Part of me wishes I could just know everything and do everything myself. But I think ultimately there's that weird thing where even your music, right? Would your music exist without Ableton and the coders behind it? And would Ableton exist without the hardware engineer? Like, we're all a society. And so there's, I don't know. I think ultimately design, like I remember when I brought Serum, I was very proud when I finished it and went up to Thanksgiving and visited my brother. And I was just like, yay, I finished my synthesizer. And he's like, oh, that's cool. How did you code oscillators? And I was like, oh, well, I kind of licensed some code for that. And, I did the whole design and these warp modes and blah, blah. And he's like, oh, but you didn't code like the kernel of the, and I was like, yeah, no. And he's like, oh, so you're more of a designer. And I was like kind of like defeated by him saying that. And I was like, no, you're right. Yeah, I'm more of the designer, and I'll wear that badge, right?
I mean, I think there's something to be said, though, for like being able to take something and give it good application than actually making the thing itself, right? Like, there's a lot of programmers out there who make these like really impressive pieces of software, but they're not able to apply it in such a way that any normal, technically illiterate person could ever use it, like anything less than a programmer couldn't figure out how to get it off a GitHub repository and install it and use it, right? So it's like there's something to be said, I think, for taking those ideas that your brother might be talking about, like these really impressively coded kernels for oscillators or whatever, and then actually putting them into a user-friendly skin and executable file that someone can click on and turn into a sick dubstep bass.
That's right. Exactly. I mean, I was not happy with the synths on the market, and I wanted to make one that I wanted to make sounds on. I mean, that's really the impetus behind Serum by and large, was like, I'm watching Skrillex and all these guys use FM8 and Massive and stuff. But then I tried, like, I don't want to make a bank of presets on these. Like, and so it was sort of like, well, why not? And that was sort of part of the impetus behind Serum, is like, well, I want to see the wavetable. Well, I want to draw the wavetable. I want to import a sound to a wavetable. I want to have a little bit more visual feedback on like where the phase of an LFO is, or where the point on the envelope is, or give me envelope times at least. And so there was just a whole lot of things that made me feel like really frustrated trying to make sounds on other synths. And so I really made a short list in my head of those things, and just that's where I started. I started trying to do the things that were going to make me want to make sounds. And along the way making Serum, I thought, wow, I think this is really working. I'm actually having fun every time I open up the prototypes. I'm really having fun. Like, I get lost making presets in a sense. And then I thought, I wonder if once this is out, if people will make their first ever bank of patches for a synth. And that happened to a bigger degree than I ever expected. Obviously, the popularity happened to a bigger degree, but I also think that was sort of a feedback loop, that all these people making presets for Serum were, in essence, advertising Serum. And I've never advertised Serum once, short of maybe talking about it on stuff like this. So that really was more effective than I expected. And so I think part of Serum's success is, or a lot of Serum's success is due to the accessibility of the interface. I'd like to think, sonic decisions I've made and the curation of other people's DSP a bit and that kind of a thing. But by and large, I think it really, what my desire was, other people out there had that same want, which is something that's really giving them a visual understanding of what's happening sonically.
How do you feel about these companies like, say, Cymatics or whatever, making like shit tons of money off sort of selling preset packs for Serum? Because I mean, like, I guess, like, how do you feel about that? Because I know how I feel about it from my perspective.
I love it in a degree, right? People ask me, hey, am I allowed to sell presets for Serum? And I'm like, yes, please, of course, do your thing. they're advertising my stuff. So I talked to one of the Cymatics guys, and he's like, I can't believe you don't advertise on Facebook, Steve. You would make so much more money. Like we take $40,000 a month in Facebook ads. And I'm like, what?
Dude.
Like, that is insane. And he's like, well, yeah, but we double that back on revenue.
Yeah.
And I'm like, and he's like, why don't you do it? And I was like, I don't need to, because you are. People are seeing $40,000 a month of the Serum being thrown in their face. And obviously that's almost better than me advertising it. That just makes them feel like there's the Serum
They
world
can't use
out there.
their presets unless they get Serum in the first place anyway. I actually had a guy on the podcast recently named Kermode who worked for Cymatics as a sound designer. And he said at one point he was working there, he was the only sound designer working at Cymatics, and they had like 6 advertisers working there. So it's like a 6 to 1 ratio of advertisers to actual people making sound design content.
Yeah, a few things come to mind to me. Like, one is that there's different ways to approach making a living or running a business, and I can't fault anyone that sees a certain angle. It's always really hard to know what would have happened if you took a different way. Maybe if Cymatics was a little more on the down low, would they have more respect in the community? I think there's some people that have a negative impression of Cymatics, not because of the products, but purely because they're sick of seeing the ads or getting emails every day from them or something or whatever. So that's tends to be my feeling, is that I've always had a much more like small-minded approach, I think, which is that I've always approached my stuff as a boutique operation. I was like, this is just me. It's this one-man shop versus like some huge company like Native Instruments or something. And so, I kind of think I can charge my thinking always was, I can charge a premium and give people personal support and free updates and this kind of a thing. And if I am able to gain people to think positively of me, they might refer me via word of mouth, or they might come back for the next thing that I make and buy that. And so to me, kind of customer satisfaction and that personal one-on-one relationship was my thinking. And I think maybe I've outgrown that now in the sense of the popularity of Serum. I still do all the support. I answer emails, and often, within the hour or whatever I can. I really care about the customers being happy, because they're the ones that have allowed me to get here or continue to support me. And so I think of them a bit more like clients. And I think it's worked well for me. I feel like there's generally not a negative attitude towards me. Or maybe I try to ignore those negative things. But generally, people are like, Steve's nice and he's so helpful and responsive. Right?
That's kind of all I've heard as well. Yeah, it's like every time I've mentioned to somebody in passing that I should get you on the podcast or something like that, or if anyone has ever said to me like, oh, have you ever chatted with Steve or whatever, and I've said no, they're always like, oh, you should just hit him up, he's super friendly, he answers all the emails himself. Speaking of which, that leads me to something I wanted to ask you about, like just sort of what your day-to-day is like at this point, because like you said you do like before we got on this podcast, you said you wanted to do it before you dive into a shit ton of bug fixes that you were working on, and obviously you said you answer all these support emails by yourself, and you kind of like your own customer service team and whatnot. So it's like, what does your day-to-day look like? Is it just Serum all day, every day, kind of just bugs and customer support? Or
it's great. I mean, I really love my life. It's like everyone in 2020, it's pretty isolated, right? I'm pretty much on my own thing. But, as of this year, I mean, largely my day-to-day is chatting with Joel on Discord and sending each other stuff we're working on or jokes or whatever, chatting with some other friends and that kind of a thing. I don't really have a set exact, like, this is what I do every day. So wake up in the morning, try to knock out all of those European or Asia emails that have backed up. And then once I'm done with email, it's sort of like, right, what to do. And I tend to have some sort of vague to-do list. So there tends to be something that I'm working on. It's become challenging, though, because of the popularity of Serum. The support has definitely increased. And so I'm going to make a move probably this coming year to get someone to at least be a first tier so they can knock out the customer service stuff. Also, I now have 10 plus years of customers. So I have people going, I can't find my purchase. I don't know what email I used. I have that like 3 or 4 times a day. And it gets a little tedious, right? You're sort of like trying to help someone locate their bank transaction or whatever. So I would love to get that off my plate so that I could really focus on the what's best for all of the users. And what's best for all the users is not putting my time on one user at a time, but rather what the users want and making the new stuff. So I'm working on major changes to Serum for this coming year.
Anything of that you can talk about, or?
Well, when things aren't actually done, I don't really like to, because sometimes I'll change my mind, or sometimes, it's that kind of a thing. But basically, I want to increase the sonic palette of Serum without losing the essence of Serum. So, by and large, the interface is going to be, it's going to remind you of Serum very much, right? I think people have a certain, motor memory, spatial relationship to it. And I don't really want to break that. I see no reason to try to make Serum 2 be this like behemoth. At the same time, I want a lot more sonic flexibility. So there'll be a lot of new stuff coming. You could pretty much look at any facet of Serum and say, okay, imagine that does more. And that's kind of what it's going to be. So a lot of incremental stuff. I don't really know until it's done for sure, but I'm really excited because I found some collaborators that are going to help me do things that I'm not capable of. And that's like, to me, I think of Serum maybe like you think of as a piece of music or an album. It's almost like something external to you in a way, like a child, or it's its own thing. And you're like, right, what can I put into this thing to make it be the thing it wants to be? And so I'm not like precious in a certain way with me and Serum. I want Serum to be the thing that makes everyone who's purchased it glad they did, because they're like, oh my God, I can't believe how much is new, and you could totally charge for this, but you're not, and that kind of a thing.
It's really impressive, the stuff that you've done to Serum. Like the updates, I thought that were insanely cool. The coolest one, I think, was being able to attach stuff to the LFO points. Like that was very useful,
Nice.
I think, because it's just like, especially for techno stuff, right? Like growing things over time where stuff opens up and then like shrinks back down into a tight sort of envelope again. Like that kind of stuff was great. And the other thing, I think it was something to do with using the noise oscillator as an LFO or something like that.
Yeah, noise is a mod source that's been in there for a while, but I have added some features in the wavetable editor where you can send your wavetable to the noise oscillator, and so it's just very convenient if you want to have it just act as another, periodic waveform, so to speak. And then of course you can modulate anything with that waveform at that point once it's in the noise oscillator. So that the drag export of the last played note, some people really love that, so they can just kind of bash through presets and just have a whole bunch of little sounds on the timeline that they can chop up and all that. But yeah, I've done, I think, about 250 updates to Serum over its now long life, I guess 6 years or whatnot. And it's grown into a lot of dead ends. So now this like last couple of weeks, I've just been tearing things down and trying to make, getting a little help on that, thankfully, with some skilled people. But the tearing everything down to sort of make it the code more manageable and modular, so that the back end things aren't as difficult to accomplish. Because right now if you could imagine like a huge modular patch with like thousands of chords everywhere as an analogy, and I don't know if you've ever been in that situation, but you like pull one thing out and then it breaks stuff, and you're like, oh wait, what hole was that in? And you're like, oh no. My whole patch is now met. And so it feels like a bit of a minefield, the way that I've kind of hardwired so much into place, because I was just really spot building for my specific needs. So yeah, it's sort of a couple steps back to take a huge step forward. It's kind of what's happening now. And so super excited for next year. And that's what I'm doing on the near term, is just refactoring and getting stuff in place to then launch into some new creative spaces, sonic spaces.
So I have a friend that works at Apple as a security engineer on the security team there. And he's like a really talented programmer. And I asked him the other day, I was like, what is it that makes somebody a really talented programmer? And he said his answer was interesting, and I never really thought of it. But he was like, basically the thing that makes a really good programmer from like an average programmer is being able to sort of like hold things at like every different level of like every different layer of the code, and realizing like how everything on all of those layers kind of interacts, and realizing, like you were just saying, if you pull something out of that one hole, how it's going to affect all those other things that it's kind of affecting or attached to or related to.
Interesting.
And just like being able to sort of abstract on every layer like that, he said, is one of the things that he thinks makes a really talented programmer. Yeah,
I guess I wouldn't disagree with him. I don't even feel like I'm a good person to he's probably better versed to talk about what makes a good programmer than I. When I was just getting interested in the VSTs, I was just doing rock records, and I had this idea for like a very high resolution drum sample library, and that ended up being FXpansion BFD. So it was sort of my base idea, and then I did all these drum kit recordings with all the different velocities and preserving all the microphone pairs so you could mix it like real drums. And there was nothing quite like it at the time, and it sold pretty good. And then so I was inspired from that to start getting into plugin programming myself. Right, when you're like on an email threads with the developers and stuff, you feel like you're kind of getting your toe in the door, or at least being able to peer in the door into what that world is about. And so I was like, I want to do what you guys do. Where do I start? And or I asked, should I go back to college? Should I get maybe I should take a few years and get a degree or something? And one of the programmers there said, no, that's really not necessary. Like the most what you're going to learn from in school is how to interface with other programmers. They'll teach you how to do proper like syntax and structure and this and that, so that you can kind of all work together as a team. And that's how most software is developed. You have a team that are checking in, checking out of the repo and they're forking, and they're making their own changes to their little section of the thing. It's almost like a bunch of people in a Minecraft world, right? Working on different parts of the map at the same time. And I never had that luxury. And his suggestion was, since you're just a solo guy, just don't bother. You don't have to worry about how things interface with other people. So I think he was right in a certain sense. And you build your own mental maps of things as you go. And you build your own ways of doing things. And I feel a little bit like, I think Bill Gates said some quote, which I'll totally mangle, but he basically said he'd hire a lazy programmer over another one because the lazy one's going to figure really clever ways to get things accomplished. And that's very much me. I'm incredibly lazy. And I just figure out these ways to make something work. And that tends to be a very efficient solution. Like it's not over-engineered. I'm just like hard patching, right? Not great for maintenance, but it's definitely great for getting stuff down.
Yeah, speaking of maintenance and laziness and all that stuff, how's the Serum code look? Is it like pretty messy in the back end? Do you comment it all out and like keep it all neat and easy to, in such a way that it is easy to do updates in the future? Or is it pretty much just like a dog's breakfast, just everything's jammed into some text files and like...
Yeah, I'm a lot more monolithic than most people. So I don't know if you've browsed a lot of repos, maybe a little bit, right? Like you kind of look at the files on a GitHub repo or something. And generally you have all of these files that have very little content in them. And in fact, that drives me a little crazy. You're like, what's in this file? And it's like an include to another file. You're like, okay, what's in that file? 3 includes to 3 other things. And you're like, all these files are just here to include other files. Like, what the heck? Like, I can't even tell what's actually got code in it versus just like this management hierarchy thing. So that, I don't know. I'm a lot more like terrible in the other direction, which is like these huge monolithic files that have like everything, WAV file loading and saving and all your automation stuff and your process functions and this and that, right? And so it's pretty messy from a standpoint, but I've had certain developers that are trained, went to school, and they follow best practices, and they look at the Serum code and they're just sort of like, yeah, I can't even look at this. And then I have guys who are a little more seasoned and have seen a lot of code and worked on a lot of VSTs for various companies, and they look at Serum, they go, actually, this is really like, you didn't do a very bad job here. This is actually really easy to make sense of. So it kind of depends on like, if you're really expecting best principles of code structuring and stuff, it's a mess. But if you're actually talking about being sort of efficient and not over and just more direct to this is what it does and this is where it goes and you end up and you don't have a lot of stuff to chase, Serum's actually very to the point.
Could be the same as like project files and collaborating in that way, right? Which is something that I'm pretty seasoned in, and I'm not very seasoned in coding, so I can't really talk about that. But Yeah, definitely. I notice when I get like project files back, if somebody puts all their drums at the bottom and then like their synths at the top or something, I'm like, what the fuck are you doing? It's like the way I go is like drums at the top, then bass, then synths, then like effects, then vocals at the bottom, you know? So it's kind of like, I feel like I'm building like the base of everything from the top down to the thing that you want to hear on the top of the mix, right? And I guess like some people do it the other way. They put their drums on the bottom, then their bass, then they like and build up from the bottom up. But I guess it's just, like when I look at any project file of mine, it doesn't matter if nothing is named. I just know that that's the order in which I do stuff. So I just know where things are going to be. I guess it's kind of the similar.
Yeah, that's a personal thing. I mean, I saw someone recently saying all DAWs are designed wrong. It was like clickbait, I guess, or whatever. And I was like, I got to see what this is about. And he was basically saying that. He's like, no, the bass is the lowest thing, so it should be at the bottom. But all DAWs start you at the top. So and I'm like, this is so arbitrary and personal. Like, it doesn't really matter.
Yeah, I mean, that only matters if you like start writing your song from the bass line, right?
Yeah, I guess so. I don't know. Like, to me, I can deal with the abstraction that tracks don't need to have a vertical placement. But I do think maybe more relevant to the code is like, you will see people with like, 120 track Ableton session with like every single one's just named audio 56, audio 57, or track 56, track 57. And then you'll see people with, and then they'll have just like one region or versus people that might be a little more tidy and organized, name all their tracks, group stuff together, even though they don't need the group there, but just to be like ergonomic, right? And so that to me is the closer analogy where like proper coding, you're going to have those groups and things are going to be all well named and all of that. And then my stuff, to make the analogy backwards, is like my code is maybe not quite as like organized and tidy. Like to me, it's like what matters is how it compiles and all of the, stuff gets out. I'm pretty decent with variable names. I do that for myself. So some people just use a lot of single letter variables all over the place. And I tend to use a little more descriptive variables, but just for me to not have to go back and read my own code and be like, wait, what is this again? So it just helps. And I do make unnecessary comments again, just to myself, so that when I'm looking at scrolling in code, I can see, oh, this is if this is missing, then do you do this or whatever. So, yeah, I don't know. Apparently I'm somewhere in between. Like, totally like by the book schooled coders don't like me. The guys that are actually really talented at making plugins think I'm actually doing a pretty decent job. So it's awesome. Somewhere in between.
Yeah, nice. Do you think the genre rhythm would exist without Serum?
Oh, that's a good question. I mean, I think it's definitely one of those hypotheticals. Like, would anything happen without anything? Like, I mean, I always have sort of the little bit of the cynical attitude of, well, maybe it would be a better genre without Serum or something. Like maybe something else would have come on. I don't know. Ultimately, from what I gather and from what people tell me, I guess the answer would be no. Like they say that, the reverb filter and this and that kind of thing. Like the genre wouldn't exist without Serum and or dubstep 2.0, whatever that even means, because I actually don't really know. That wouldn't exist without Serum. But I don't really know. I think of it a bit like autotune or something. Like maybe it's for better or worse. Like I can't say that the musical landscape is better because of it, because people would have made maybe different music or whatnot. So, but if people are happy, then and Serum was responsible, then that's great. But I definitely don't like. My head doesn't go into taking claim for something that wasn't really my creativity. It reminds me a bit of when I was, pre-coding and just farming out ideas to developers. I met this guy in Paris who made this software called Xfer, and it was like a beat slicer type of thing, like a beat reorderer kind of thing, way back in '98 or something. And I just wrote him a pipe dream email. Hey, if you ever make another thing. And I just wrote him just this, like, I was like stoned and just wrote him this like long email of all that. Oh, make it with like 8 of them and do this and this. And then he actually did. He took my whole email and he turned it into this thing called Divine Machine and added a bunch of his own ideas too. He's like, Steve, guess what I've been working on for the last 18 months? And it was like, oh my God. I forgot about that email. And then I made a track with it and I sent it to him. And I was like, how does this make you feel? How does this make you feel to like hear this music made with your software? And he was like, honestly, Steve, I don't feel a thing. I was kind of like, what? He was like, it was your decisions made that music. I didn't make that music. Like, I feel no personal connection to it. And then fast forward to today, and I've gotten emails from people very similar. Here's a thing I made with Serum. Like, how does it make you feel? And it's kind of the same. I'm like, well, you could have used if like I didn't make that music. You made the decisions. You picked the settings or the presets or whatever and the notes. And I just don't feel like I am in that music, you know what I mean? Or that it's because of me that it exists. So yeah, it's funny to come full circle on that, because I definitely remember thinking like, wow, that, you know, this developer that made this possible must like be proud of my awful breaks track, you know? Nope.
What do you ever get emails for feature requests that you're like, oh, that's a great idea and put it in? Or is it mostly you coming up with those features that you want to add to the thing, and a lot of the emails you're getting are just like, oh, you should add another reverb filter or a sixth fucking oscillator?
Yeah, I do. I mean, there's been times where I've added a feature like on the spot. Someone says something and I'm like, I think I can do that. And I just go into the code. I mean, a lot of the process features in the wavetable editor, for instance, a lot of the new additions, especially, like take the phases from one frame and apply it to all the frames, or some of the other interpolating bins or phases across tables and stuff. That was all stuff that someone say, hey, would this be possible? Or like thin tables by half, right? Like, oh, I just want every other table. I'm like, oh, that's really easy. I can do that right now.
Like,
and so I'll do it before I answer the email. And then I'm like, oh, I might as well send them a build. And so then, so some people have asked things, and then like within an hour, they have a version of Serum that does that thing. And I love that I'm able to do that, like that nimble thing that like a huge company could never do, right? Because that would go to the product manager. The product manager would assign it if it fit into the paradigm and all of that. So I love the fact that I can do that. And so I do. Yeah, I'll take ideas from everyone. But what I really like is looking for consensus ultimately. I made some mistakes like early on. I had a plugin called Lucifer, and then I had a customer that wrote me and saying, hey, can you add a knob that like does this weird thing? I can't remember what it was exactly. And I added it, but there wasn't room on the interface. So now there's this knob kind of floating on the interface. And then everyone's like, what's that knob do? And that's such a weird feature, you know? And so I kind of learned early that like, you can't just like stick stuff in without trying to keep in mind that simplicity is part of what makes any music tool good. Is the limitations are actually kind of some of the strength, and you don't want to just overwhelm people with option anxiety, or especially back in the day. I remember there's a lot of like freeware synths and stuff, and I'd download them and it'd be like a huge wall of knobs. I'm turning knobs, but the sound's not changing because those knobs only change if that knob is set this way, you know, and this is, and it's very frustrating. So I always have, I've always tried to keep an eye on trying not to just make things feature rich just for the sake of
you also
having a lot of stuff.
Need to think about the fact that there's just so many users, right? Like I'm thinking about this from a perspective of like Ableton, right? I've posted in forums a ton of times being like, Ableton should totally have this feature. Like, why the fuck have they not implemented this? And then somebody else will respond in the thread being like, well, I use Ableton for triggering things in theater performance, and this would actually be like kind of annoying to have that feature or whatever. And I'm like, oh shit, I never really thought not everyone's using Ableton to make bangers like I am.
Yeah, I respect the Ableton design team. I don't know how they really do their process, but I really feel like when people request things, they do take note, but then they take time to figure out what's the best implementation, like what's the most Ableton-like way to implement this thing. And they don't really try to rush out and get in a DAW feature war, but they do definitely keep in mind like how to take in the various ideas and either redesign or integrate things in a way that it's not clutter and it's not overwhelming for users. So they've been kind of a source of inspiration in that way of how much power is in Ableton. But then you compare it to like Logic, which has menus and then menus above the menus, and then each menu has lots of submenus, and it's just like it's kind of overwhelming in a certain sense. They've actually done a good job with Logic, I think, refactoring it in ways, but still, simplicity with power is one of my mantras. I want to make something that allows people to kind of go deep, but when maybe it's their first synth, or maybe they're just in the moment making music, and you want to kind of make a sound, but you want to also keep that like idea of the fact that you're making music and not in a sound design session. That was really part of my thinking with Serum, because that was me in a lot of music sessions where it's like, I want an original sound. I don't want to just surf presets, but I have an idea in my head for the sound of it, but I don't want to get taken out of the music making mindset and just go full sound design mode. I think a bit like being stoned or something. It's like if you're like, short-term memory loss is kind of similar or something, right? You're like, it can't be too difficult or because you're going to get taken away. Like now you're in this different weird space. And so it's better to just have this sort of like, where things are and all of that kind of a thing. So yeah, I had another point in there from before, but it's gone now. So.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think the way Ableton does things is like pretty clever and neat. I like that they they don't like overly do the menu thing. I think the company that's probably the worst at this, and not to say that this DAW is bad, it's extremely powerful, but Fruity Loops Studio, it's like, because it started, I think, as just, like a drum machine, and then they just kept like building on top of that and on top of that, and you can kind of tell it's like they didn't really think of a way to like integrate all of the stuff into what it is today, and instead just kept adding to the original thing rather than rebuilding it or thinking of a thing like an overall picture from scratch. And so for instance, it's like the mixer and the arrangement page are like not attached. You have to attach them manually channel by channel, for instance, like that's clearly that's because
I was early on with FL design, like not design. I was a beta tester for FL back in like 98 maybe. So it was like FL3 or 4. And that was an interesting one because I remember it started out kind of as one programmer who's no longer working with them, I don't think, Gall. And he would talk about how like if he changed a hotkey for export MIDI, there would be people that would freak out, right? Like Alt-Shift-M no longer exports my MIDI, what the hell? And this is something that you kind of face as a developer, is that when you change things, you're going to have people that are going to say it's worse now. Like I liked the way it used to, I was familiar and comfortable. I'm just going to keep using the old version because I like the old way. So they're kind of stuck in that quandary a bit where there are users that really want just the simplest way of FL, right? Just make a step sequencer, XOX drum beat, and then they sell it on their Beats website or whatever, right? So they have these people that want this simplicity, and then you have obviously like the average user that knows that the piano roll is just sort of an inevitability and is jumping into that a little sooner rather than later. And I struggle with FL for the same reason of it having a bit of a schizophrenic kind of design. They've made a lot of good decisions, and I'm very impressed that people put up with the interface or learn it, and then at that point that becomes their preferred thing. It's a number of EDM producers that are quite successful that have done basically all their work in FL. But if you asked me to mix something in FL, I would tell you to get lost.
Yeah, what would you mix things in these days? Because you said you were a Pro Tools user from way back, but like, how do you feel about Pro Tools in 2020? You feel like it's dated now, or do you feel like it's kind of still got its place in studios? Because I mean, like my thought on it, and this is not to say that Pro Tools is bad, but I feel like it's kind of a legacy thing, right? It's like you just need to use it to be a part of the cool kids club and work in the cool kids studios and be in the big studios with the big engineers, sort of thing. It
depends what you're doing, right? So specific to mixing, I think Pro Tools is pretty sweet. Like you could argue that you might know something that's better. If you want a lot of I/O count, like 96 ins, 96 outs, patch in all this outboard gear, low latency inserts, you get like a 7 sample latency, so you can patch in compressors and all this stuff. The hardware is great, and you can't do that in most DAWs. You can't integrate the Pro Tools hardware. So it still has this high-end niche for the people that need a ton of track count, a ton of I/O. Still has a good point. You want to record 96 channels at once, it's a good system to use. And I also think it's probably the best audio editor. If you asked me to chop up thousands of drum hits in a in a recording you had of, or whatever, like I would use Pro Tools for that. I did BFD, all the drum recording and editing of BFD in Pro Tools, and I had to export over BFD and the expansion libraries. I exported it over 1 million trimmed regions, named in a specifically named scheme, and I would dare you to try to export and trim and name 1 million regions in Ableton, right? It's just
there's a way to do it with a Max device now, but yeah.
I mean, it's just like to get those sample accurate start points, to correlate 11 channels or 18 channels of audio, to get that bust and printed out, to get the 18 bust and printed down to 11 and all of this stuff, and to do this in a way that's not going to drive you crazy with manual labor. you would almost want to write software, and then you'd realize that that's not the way.
Right. That's a good idea.
So Pro Tools is the best game in town, in my opinion, for dialogue editing, for that kind of a work, group track editing and all of that. I actually think it's probably still the best.
Actually,
but
one thing
music making is a different story.
Yeah. One thing I really, really love about Pro Tools actually that I think Ableton or every DAW really should implement is tab to transient. I think that's a great feature.
Exactly. That's one of the things that came to mind, as well as the just tab to transient, or even just tab to regions, right? Like I could have, say I recorded a snare drum 100 times and I was trying to sort the velocities because no drummer is going to get that velocity range linear. So now I need to shuffle around these different drum regions, drum sample hits to get them in proper order. And then being able to tab to the next region. And same for the trimming, right? You could zoom in a lot and just tab and watch how the fronts, because you really want consistency. You don't want any timing deviation. It matters extra much when you're dealing with a whole bunch of, correlated files, so to speak, that someone's going to be triggering from a single MIDI note with different velocities. You don't want any accidental groove going on with your poor sample start trimming. So using that tab to region, I was really using more than tab to transient, but then shuffle mode, right? It also keeps things nice and tidy. So you could trim the region and now you don't have a gap between your two. It just snaps them all together.
Yeah, that's a nice feature.
I still think Pro Tools is best for audio editing. I could argue it's one of the best for mixing, but to really answer your original question is I was mixing for a lot of clients in Ableton Live. And I did like will.i.am and Justin Bieber. I did a bunch of like big artists, bunch of big EDM artists and stuff like that. And I would mix in Ableton and I beat out like on will.i.am single that it's my only number one as a mixer, but that I beat out 5 guys that did traditional mixes in SSL rooms, and I just did it all in the box with Ableton. Because ultimately, the tools aren't what matters. And I think you might know this as you might have experienced this as you develop musically and technically. You go like, actually, I could make a decent program. I could make a decent tune in this other thing. I'd have to, I'd be a little slower trying to like learn the ropes, but.
You can make a decent tune in anything for sure. Like we're going back to the conversation before, I've made decent sounding tunes in $5 iPhone apps, like nothing I've released, but I mean, I've sat there for, half a day messing around with an iPhone app before and made a tune in it. Not the best tune I've ever made, but it's a tune,
Yeah, I think the weak link is us kind of ultimately when it comes to this stuff, your experience, your ear. When you're starting out, especially, it's really hard to know when is it right, when is it wrong, and to trust your own tastes and trust your own judgments can be very difficult. And then I think the more that you have experience making music and all that, the more that you can kind of have a mental idea in your head, this abstraction of where you want it to be. And then you have something that's coming out of the speakers and that's on the screen that's differing. And then you're able to kind of make that assessment of where that disparity lay and steer the computer towards your target. And it's just musical development, I guess. And I think that's what comes to mind for me in terms of the weakest link is people love to have DAW wars, but they can't make a good song, or they love to compare synths and have a synth battle of what synth is the best, when it's like ultimately like, dude, you're just wasting time. And this is kind of a making false equivalences, and like you can use anything and make great music.
Yeah, absolutely. So with all the mixing stuff that you did, like you said, you did some number one stuff, or you did a number one thing for will.i.am, and you obviously like mixed Nine Inch Nails and all that kind of stuff. Was the deals you were getting for those kind of things generally just like a flat fee, or did you end up getting publishing and stuff on any of those, or like how does that kind of work?
No publishing. I never aimed for that. I've always been when it came to like studio work, I always just thought of it as a general tradesman. Like, just give me my premium day rate and I can work 6 weeks on your record, and now I'll have enough money saved up that I can spend the next 6 weeks playing video games and fooling around in music software on my own music or whatever. So that was always my thinking. It was just like, just get a good day rate. And so Nine Inch Nails I actually didn't do mixing for. I spent 2 years working for Trent, and I was basically like a kind of a roving guy. I would do various things. He'd go in and hit cardboard boxes or whatever, and then I'd be the guy that chopped up all the samples and got them in folders, to get loaded into the hardware samplers, or I would hit record for him to loop record vocals, and then he'd say, "Oh, I'm going to go play video games. Pick out, comp it together, pick out the good ones." And so I'm like, "Oh, holy shit! I'm picking the freaking vocals for the Nine Inch Nails record." So it was all very cool to me at the time. But yeah, then I ended up doing a lot of sound design, preset making reactor instruments that would just be weird, and patches for a lot of different hardware synths that he owned. And so he would just kind of give me a task, and then I'd spend the next week or whatever it was on just that thing.
That's awesome. Sounds like a cool job, just being Trent's right-hand man to doing a bunch of weird shit in the studio.
It was amazing. It was one of my favorite artists. Like Downward Spiral was like my favorite album at the time when I ended up getting the gig. So it was like one of those like too good to be true kind of moments. And then I ended up learning a lot from Trent and Alan Mulder, and I learned a lot from Charlie Clouser, who's just amazingly talented and just super forthcoming with knowledge and info. And so I learned so much from those guys. And then I also learned a ton, more than I intended or whatever. After the album was done, after those 2 years, I realized that I had learned a lot just from my own work, right? When you're spending 18 hours a day using the software and the tools, and you're trying to do creative stuff, you can imagine, like, I'm sure you've learned that way yourself. It's like, just learn by doing. If Trent says, make me 100 piano sounds, well, by sound number 80, I've learned some tricks, and I've learned some stuff about this synthesizer that I didn't know, and all of that.
Yeah, I had that experience with Vital actually, like very recently, because I made 60 presets or 70 presets for it, and yeah, the first couple I made, I was like, this synth feels kind of weird, and then by like preset 30 or 40, I was like, all right, this is now a thing that I feel comfortable opening up and making a sound in about 2 seconds.
Yeah, different tools have different like bars of entry, or it's the simplicity with power that's always hard to hit, right? Like you want to make something that's powerful and flexible, but if stuff's hidden away, people aren't even going to know about it. And now you've just made this feature that only 3 people know about or use. And so I think, I think a lot of my software kind of suffers that in different places. There's things that even the power users have no idea you can do. And yeah, that holds true, I think, across all of my plugins.
Who do you think is the biggest power user of Serum?
Oh, God. I mean, the one that's probably impressed me the most is probably AU5.
I was about to say that too, yeah.
His tutorials are so, I love his way of speaking, and I love his kind of mannerism, and I love what he does. He comes up with these like tricks or whatever, where I'm like, well, that wasn't something I intended. Yeah. There's a lot of talented users of Serum, but a lot of them color inside the lines where I kind of intended things to be. But he's one of those guys that kind of goes a little outside of, he finds creative things to do with the options provided, and that's always like the most interesting to me. So I don't, who's the biggest power user? I don't know. I know various people who say they claim they've used Serum more than me, and I'm always not sure. I'm like, I don't know. I mean, yeah, I've been on the ugly code side of it a lot, but I've spent a good number of hours in Serum. But some of them might be right. I don't know too much. I don't really know. I mean, the one funny thing is that I don't really spend much time like watching Serum stuff too much, because it's a little cringy. It's like listening to someone review your album sometimes or something. I don't know. It's sort of like, I'd just rather not do this right now. I don't want to hear this. Watching people use Serum or tutorials in particular are a little cringy, because people describe things in ways where you're like, oh, that's not correct, or there's a better way to say that, and all that kind of a thing. But
right. The things that really impressed me that Austin has done tutorials on, the 2 big ones I can think of, is one is using Serum effects as a volume shaper by using the distortion unit in it to sort of put the transfer curve to 0 and back using the dry wet, and then sending like an external instrument device into it from your drum MIDI,
that's not necessary anymore. But now I have, because of that video, I added audio into the noise oscillator, and you can just drag just the noise oscillator volume.
Nice. Yeah. Oh, right. Of course. Yeah. So that, and then the other one is like the DC offset thing he did with, I think it was the LFO or the oscillator, and then he sends the DC offset out as CV.
Yes, this one I did kind of intend and kind of messed with a bit. LFOTool actually started because of Joel Deadmau5. He wanted a way to control his modular synths. And so he's like, Steve, how hard would it be to make like something where I can draw my own curve? Because there was a plugin called, Expert Sleepers was the company that
Silent
made it.
Way?
Silent Way, yes.
Yeah.
And so So he was like, well, this plugin's really cool. It syncs to the DAW tempo, but it's only like saw, sine, triangle. He's like, how hard would it be to make it something I could draw my own shape? It's like, I think I could make that into a plugin. And doing that whole node-based LFO graph was the biggest challenge for me because I had never dealt with, exponential curves and whatnot. And so in that way, at least. And so I think I did it in 2 or 3 weeks. And then I saw the Silent Way website with this like compatibility grid of what sound cards DC block versus which don't. And I was like, oh, I don't really want to deal with that support and people wanting refunds because their sound card or whatever modular nuts might want their word voltage biases or whatever. I was like, that's no fun for me. I'm not a modular guy. I'm an in the box guy. So I was like, okay, what can I make it do instead of CV? And so I got rid of the CV, which was the whole entire point of the thing to begin with. And then I did volume, filter, panning. But LFOTool, I have kind of done and used that. I think it was VCV Rack. I put Serum in VCV Rack when they added plugin hosting. And I was using Serum exactly, I guess, like Austin's doing it to just send a CV signal out to control other stuff.
Yeah, that's a cool idea. It's cool that you added that functionality. I would have never thought that was something that I really cared for as a feature, but now I know about it. It's something I'll probably use a bunch.
Yeah, it's a neat hack.
Yeah, there's another cool thing that you can do. I can't remember. Oh, that's the thing. You use this is kind of like you could do this with like a bunch of stuff. You could do it with Faceplant too, but something that Scope showed me the other day is you set the noise oscillator to be the volume of the noise oscillator to be modulated by an LFO, so you can change whatever the volume coming out of the noise oscillator is, and then you put a convolution reverb after it, and then just like load anything into the convolution reverb that you want, and then by creating this like kind of complex LFO shape, which is essentially like a hi-hat pattern going into the convolution reverb, you can kind of take like any hi-hat sample or any sample you like and turn it into like a nice controlled percussive sound.
Neat. Yeah, I've done that exact sort of sound design stuff. So I think I know what you're talking about by kind of just almost granulizing or really sculpting the shape and using the crash cymbal can now become a hi-hat or whatever, right? By just using a little piece of it and doing some kind of rhythmic gating or just single envelope on it. Yeah, and convolution on drum samples can be good fun. Yeah, interesting. I'd love to hear more about that. And see if there's anything more that would integrate internally. And as I'm trying to really just finalize what I'm going to do for Serum 2, which is just sort of a silly thing. It's like I don't advertise. I'm not worried about marketing, but there's a certain point where it makes sense to just sort of add a whole ton of stuff at once, and because there's fundamental things under the hood and fundamental things that are going to require user interface changes, it makes sense to do a whole bunch at once. So yeah, if you or any Serum users have some stuff, like the next month or two is a great time to spit it out. But I have a pretty good idea and some undertaking on what the direction is. But of course, it's a great time to see what else fits in.
Yeah, definitely some convolution reverb in there would be cool, I think.
On it.
Nice. Yeah, that's something I've been doing on like almost every sound lately, is putting like M convolution easy or whatever on like most shit, just to give everything that little bit more space. Like, because you don't want necessarily like reverb on everything, because it's like too much and it'll just like sort of end up muddying your whole mix, right? But putting just the tiny sort of like 3 millisecond small room convolution type stuff on a lot of stuff can just give it that extra polished bit of, so stuff in electronic music, it's very easy to make stuff sound too dry. So I think that kind of fixes that problem a little bit.
Yeah, it kind of gives sounds their own space, and especially if they're like a stereo process, it can really kind of give things some placement where your brain has something to kind of help decode and separate. Really short IRs are kind of my favorite use of convolution reverb. As you probably know, you have to do kind of some kind of modulation to something without it sounding like a facsimile in a way. Like if you take a good church IR or something, it's sort of like after time it kind of is a little grating because it's so static in a way, and you kind of start sensing that static imprint. But it's still there with shorter IRs, and in fact maybe more so. But there's something about that frequency plus phase adjustment that happens from a cab IR or whatever that's just really cool to me. It really imparts a lot of tone color, and it's not just frequency response, right? It's tweaking all the phase response. So you get this like new flavor of whatever that sound is of it. So yeah, I've been a big fan of that.
Yeah, the other thing I would suggest for Serum is like something like disperser. Like I know Serum already has an all-pass filter in it, but it doesn't quite have the color or the tonality that something like Kiloheart's disperser has, and that seems to be something I've been putting on sounds like a lot. Which
I cringe on feature requests that's someone else's thing, because it's always like, that's not fun for me, right? It's like, you should do what such and such does, and I'm like, well, they already do it. B, it's not inspiring for me if I think too much about the other product. But the concept, absolutely with you on. There's the all passes, which is technically similar, but it's more like one setting, right? It's sort of like it's sort of like 8 nested all passes, where theirs is N nested all passes, I believe. So yeah, I'll try to see if there's a sensible place to get something in that lets you do those sorts of things. Like, to me, it's always fun if there's some wiggle room to like do something creative or new, and like make it like this, but also do like that. Is that possible? That's always more fun to me, because then I'm like, oh,
what about
now there's a new challenge, or there's something to solve, rather than mimicking or just trying to like bite something, right? So
yeah, something I've done a little bit of with disperser is racking them up in Ableton effects tracks, and you can set like the position of the pinch to be like a note, right? Like F or E or whatever. And then trying to make like a chord out of like 3 or 4 stacked ones.
Nice.
Making the resonance pitch like really...
Sort of like the resonator, but with like a much more fancy filter.
Yeah, exactly.
Cool. Yeah, that's fun. I'm not sure I'll get the polyphonic one in there, but we'll see what it can do. That's a cool idea, though.
Yeah, usually my go-to these days for sound design, if I put like a new plugin on something and I'm like, sounds like kind of cool, is what will it sound like if I duplicate it 50 times and then like just have 50 of them in a row, to be like, what does this now do? You know, like for instance, 50 dispersers in a row. It turns something into this big like this huge like bassy tail, and sounds all big and squelchy and lasery.
Yeah, neat. Yeah, I mean, I've definitely toyed with doing things like that back in the day, but it's unwieldy, of course, right? Like, it's so hard to manage that. I mean, someone could almost make like a little plugin host, right? Like a sub host where it just does that for you, right? And instances, and then allows you to do stuff like control all of the cutoffs or whatever it is across all the instances with a macro. Just automatically do it. That would be a really easy plugin to make, in fact.
Just
so maybe
someone
like, listening to
take
this
whatever this is and X50 and then
and then macro them, and maybe with a spread param, right? Like I want to have each one be not exactly the same setting, but fan them or something. Like that would be really easy to do in terms of automatable parameters for like a Juice developer. Even a beginning Juice developer could do that.
Wow. Yeah, I wonder why this doesn't exist.
Yeah. I think I remember some developer mentioning the idea to me, and he's like, "Oh, I want to do that," but that was like a year or two ago, and I think it's fair game.
Yeah.
You came up with it, not me.
There we go. Yeah, now I have to learn Juice, damn it. I tried to download Juice once. I had a quick look at it and was like, fuck this. I also did like some code camp thing online for JavaScript, and I got like halfway through it and was also like, this isn't for me.
Yeah, you know what's funny is like, to me, it's all about means to, and like my passion, I don't know, like I was never good in math class. Like you probably remember Algebra 1 or whatever it was, like y equals x squared or whatever, and you're dealing with these function graphs, and like I was just like, what the hell is this? Like, when am I going to ever need this in life? I don't plan to build bridges. I don't need this to balance a checkbook. Like, what is this stuff, right? And so I was very turned off to learning mathematics stuff because of the abstraction had no application. And then it wasn't until I started getting into making plugins where now y equals x squared is actually sexy or exciting, right? Because it's like, this is, x is input and y is output, and this is how it's going to mess up my waveform. Like now all of a sudden a function graph is like cool because it's a distortion, right? Or whatever. And so now I'm like playing with all these math formulas, trying to see, hear what these different things are going to do to a signal. And that's really kind of the level of stuff that I got bit by the bug on plugin developing, was just exactly that, just distorting signals by using basic math functions.
Yeah, definitely. I think like unless something has like a purpose behind it, it's hard to care about it. with learning. Like specifically, I teach a lot of Ableton, and generally the way I go about teaching it is start from the problem. Start from like, all right, here I'm trying to do a thing. We hit this wall, can't do the thing. Obviously, we need to solve this thing if we want to get past this and do X, Y, Z things, right? So like then we go back from there, right? How do we solve it? And I think like a lot of maths or a lot of stuff in school is not taught that way, which I think it should, right? It's kind of like with the algebra stuff. It's like if they had started by being like, all right, let's say, for instance, you maybe not a bridge, but like, you know, something that everyone wants to do, like something that's functional, you know, like
skateboard ramp,
something like that, or you know, like a checkbook, even, you know, something just like something to represent X and Y that isn't a bridge, or like this isn't something that nobody thinks they're ever going to give a shit about, but something that everyone kind of universally thinks they're going to need to know it someday, and then teach it from that sort of problematic standpoint. I think maybe be a bit more successful.
Yeah, I do agree. I mean, why do I need to know this was the constant thought in my head through most school, you know, like names and dates and this and that. Why do I need to know this? Why do I need to know this? Is constantly what my rebellious mind was asking. And it was weird to turn a corner. I mean, I'm really not the kind of nerd that enjoys programming. I see guys that actually really kind of enjoy various facets of it, like it's a game or a puzzle to them. And to me, it's just like it's a necessary thing I put up with in order to get the result I want. And I'm much more interested in, and all of my joy comes out of opening up Ableton or whatever test host I'm using and trying out this new feature and turning a knob and hearing something. Like that's the entire like rush and joy for me is the progress, I guess, right? You see just like a song or an album, see it progress along. But even DAWs, even being a musician, it's like DAWs almost felt similar to me. It's like this is the necessary evil that I have to put up with in order to make music with a computer. I don't actually enjoy using a DAW. And I'd love to address that someday, and I actually have some plans along those lines, but it's sort of like the same way Serum, I was like, I don't enjoy making sounds on synthesizers. Why not? And investigating that and trying to make it as fun as I could, limited largely by my ability as a programmer on what Serum is. I mean, there's a lot of areas of Serum I'm pretty kind of embarrassed about, but it was just, you know, best of my ability and what a CPU is capable of, you know. And so I'd love to do the same thing on a more macro level in terms of just music making. Like,
I think one of the things that makes me have the most fun in a synthesizer, like one of the synths I've had the most fun in recently has been Pigments by Arturia. And I think what it is that makes it so fun for me is the sequencer. Like I just always love synths with a sequencer in it. Like also Zebra 2 has like that ARP sequencer thing that you can just attach to anything in it. And sequencers that you can attach to all sorts of stuff. And like, especially if you can attach it to an oscillator that has like a quantization on the pitch to snap to, like you can set a scale for it to snap to, that kind of stuff. I have a lot of fun with that kind of stuff.
So you'd like that in Serum, you're saying?
Yes.
Sweet. Well, I have got news for you, but I don't have it yet.
Okay. Nice. Yeah, that kind of stuff is great for especially stuff like techno, to like, you know, again, create those sort of very drum machine / hardware machine type sounding sequences.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I've always had this weird disparity between a DAW and a plugin, right? Because it's this strange thing. I designed a drum machine called Guru, which was F-Expansion put it out and years back. Kind of designed it and built it with a friend, and then they kind of took it over, acquired it or whatever. And I had a lot of learning lessons with Guru because it's sort of weird to have a sequencer inside your sequencer, right? It feels a little redundant to have something like that. Yeah. And so that was one of the reasons I left any kind of ARP sequencer out of Serum, was I felt like, well, you have the LFOs if you really want to do this or that, you can kind of do it there. And you have the DAW if you have that. And you have stuff like Cthulhu or these other plugins. If you really want an arpeggiator, you can stick one before Serum. That has, of course, advantages like being able to use that same art pattern on layering multiple devices. When you're stuck inside a synth, not so much. So I left it off. And then also for CPU reasons, I was like, this is just going to make too many notes and blow up the CPU. Now that I've got Serum a little more optimized, I mean, it's been significantly optimized since 1.0 and more to come on that front. And so I think, so I think now for Serum 2, it makes more sense to get something that can get a little more spastic with creating notes. But I hear you. Yeah, there's something that I've learned to enjoy, the one note jam kind of approach, or the self-contained thing where you, in this one window, you can have a musical idea that goes beyond a sonic one, expressed.
Right. Yeah. And there's also interesting things I think you can do the more you get into a single layer. Like, for instance, if you have like, I don't know, one channel in your song that's a synthesizer with a shit ton of processing and just like ungodly amounts of automation on it and whatnot, that's essentially producing most of the song except for maybe the drums. And then you're able to just like quickly freeze and flatten that one channel and stretch it and reverse it and cut it up and all that kind of stuff. It's like kind of convenient and interesting to have just like so much density in one layer, then reprocessing that in other ways, I feel like can have some pretty interesting songwriting and sound design effects to it.
Yeah, it really makes sense. Different people work different ways, and I'm sure you've watched tons of people, students or whoever work, and it's weird how different people have different approaches, and it's important to keep that in mind, right? Like it's like I can't just go my way is the correct way or whatever it is, right? And like, oh, that I don't want that, therefore it shouldn't exist in my software. Like I said, it's always just about juggling the complexity, like trying to keep things simple so that power can be there, but just as long as it's not crowding you when you don't want it. And another thing with arpeggiators I really didn't like in synths, I don't know if you were back in the day with like Zeta and stuff like that.
Oh yeah, Cakewalk.
Silent, I guess as well, where you have like, you're scrolling through presets because you have a little riff on your track and you're like, okay, let me hear some different sounds. And then these ARPs keep coming up. And you're like, oh, I like the sound of that, but there's an ARP and it's a mess to even just get that ARP shut off.
Right.
But obviously there's solutions for that. So
just a button that turns the ARP off or something.
Lock ARP so that if you change presets, it's still off, right? And so, so that's an easy workaround, but that was another thing that annoyed me with ARPs and why it didn't. That was one of my excuses I gave myself for not putting one in Serum. I was like, oh yeah, then you'll have all these ARP presets that'll get in the way or something.
Yeah, I remember back in the days preset surfing and like holding one note down on a synth and being like, how the fuck is this essentially a whole song like coming out of the synth, And I didn't really understand these like crazy preset designs and didn't even know where to begin like deconstructing them to make it a useful sound for my song for sure. So I mean, you kind of maybe
it's just
alienate.
like, it's like a show and tell, but not a usable musical.
You might alienate like some beginners for that reason from using at least those presets. But yeah, I guess it's, again, like for someone like me, that's making a whole song in one synth and then destroying it somehow with effects and chopping and all sorts of stuff is kind of the thing that I like to do. I almost feel like you have to build these like crazy, for me, I always say like I almost have to write like 4 songs to make one song because I just have to keep creating like things to destroy them. Some different stuff can grow out of it. Otherwise, I just never feel quite satisfied with the end idea and never think it's like quite explored enough or polished enough.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's what makes you really unique as an artist is that your approach is not like other people. And so, this is one of these things where it's just not an absolute truth. Like, I think you can make brilliant music that is one-dimensional. You know what I mean? It's like
absolutely,
a singer-songwriter with a guitar or whatever. Like, there's so many different ways to make music. Or I love a lot of the really simple tech house, like stuff that's just like, if they can have like 4 or 5 elements, but it just somehow kind of works because they have, effects swells or whatever that keeps it tension and release and stuff like that. I'm a big fan of minimalism, but it only has a time and a place. Like I wouldn't want to, you can't listen to that through your laptop speakers. It's not listening music in the same way. So that's one of the most interesting things about music to me is it has these different functions it serves for a wedding or for a funeral or for there's like just a time and a place for different things. And it's really hard to compare music that's intended for different contexts.
Yeah, totally. I'm a big fan of simple stuff as well. Like when you're saying you're a big fan of like simple tech house stuff, like Kyle Watson comes to mind, for instance.
Yeah.
Huge fan of that sort of stuff for sure. And yeah, I mean, like I kind of envy, I think, people who can just write one idea and be like, that's the song, it's done, it sounds fucking great, it's super satisfying to listen to, etc. Because I just never feel like I can quite do that.
With Joel, that's like our BSOD thing was all about that. So we made BSOD as like a joke because I had made this plugin Lucifer, and it was kind of like Ableton Beat Repeat, but before Ableton had a beat repeat. And for that very reason, all of these DJs started buying it because they were, people were starting to DJ in live, and then they were buying my Lucifer plugin so they could do flip the beat on a song that's playing through. And so I got turned on to Beatport on its infancy by a DJ who was like, oh yeah, I used to spin vinyl, but now I just get all my stuff on Beatport. And so I was like, interesting. And I was like, Joel and I were doing like IDM glitch stuff together, not named BSOD, but we were just kind of collabing for fun. We were both nobodies, so we didn't really have an outlet or anything. And then I was like, Joel, have you heard of Beatport? And he's like, well, yeah, I heard of it. Why? I was like, dude, just listen to the top 10. Like, we could make this as a joke. And that's exactly what we did. We made a joke track, like, this is the hook. And then that hit number 1, which was crazy because we had no money, but no name behind us, just BSOD, this is the hook. And it was, I'm sure, largely due to Pete Tong, who had gotten a copy that played it on his Radio 1 show. And so anyway, that mindset we never lost, right? So BSOD was us just throwing something together. Don't overthink it. It's just art kind of a thing, right? Like, just don't torture ourselves and don't struggle. And I think that's what makes the music kind of effective, right? Because it's Electro House. It's not trying to be highbrow, and it's music to party to. Like, you're supposed to just like so it has this sort of light and effortlessness about it, which I think makes it kind of work. So we didn't do, deadmau5 blew up and went on his own, and we've stayed friends and collaborated on a variety of things, but we didn't do music for, I think, 5 or 6 years there or something like that. And then this January or February, I flew out to Toronto and hung out with Joel, and we were like, we should make some tunes. Okay, so we went in the studio, and then we were both kind of like, how did we do this? Like, what was the process? Because so much has changed, like, since we last made some music. And I was like, dude, we were just trying to crank stuff out. We were doing 2 songs a day. We were just like, just if something's cool, print it, like, just next. And so it's just this sort of just like go forward and like almost like, I don't know, like speed drawing or something, right? Like, okay, the clock's starting, whatever's done in 4 hours, that's the song, kind of a mindset of it. Just don't overthink anything. Like, and that's so fun. Like, it's so liberating if you come from a much more deliberate, like, tortured artist, like, long process mindset. It's fun to just have things crank out. Yeah, granted, at the end of the day, it might not survive the test of time, or it might not be the music for all functions, and some people might think it's trash. But to me, I love that idea of go in the studio and actually just have a good time. Don't, because I've had so many, most of my studio life has been as a client. Or sorry, I have a client, and I'm just there getting paid to be there. And to me, there's just sort of this work-like pressure of being in a studio, that there's expectation and all of that. And there's something very fun about just going in and having fun and getting something done, because I'm sure you've had times going in a studio having fun, but no song gets made, right?
Right, yeah. I think you can kind of feel that too, like at the other end of it, right? As a listener, even if you're a listener, I think with no concept of how music is made or anything like that, I think there's some like subconscious level at which you can feel if something has been sort of forced versus if something has been made just out of pure fun. And it kind of like exerts this like energy about it that's, fresh and nice.
Yeah, and especially for party music, what better mindset to be in,
right? Yeah,
than like having fun. And there's been so many hit songs over the years that were just joke tracks, right? Like Beastie Boys' "Fight for Your Right to Party" or "Girls." Like, their 2 biggest radio songs were jokes that they were just blowing off steam before they made their real songs, or after or whatever, and became the biggest things because it's like they're having fun, and that comes across, and it's not taking itself too seriously, and it's not. It's the effortlessness, and if it's party music, especially, you should be kind of partying, making it.
Yeah, that's a good point. So do you and Joel have 2 projects then? Because I thought the project you guys were in was called Test Pilot.
No, that Test Pilot is Joel alter ego. So that's like techno Joel. So what Joel ran into a bit was, which a lot of DJs do once you have that certain level of visibility or whatever, like when you're one of those big names,
people just expect
is that
something.
They expect certain things from you. Yeah. Like if they're going to book you for a gig, they want you to play ghosts and stuff, or they want you to be kind of commercially or something. Like he ran into that, especially with Vegas gigs and stuff, where they're like, we're paying you so much, we want you to play David Guetta or something. He's like, dude, I don't do that. And then he's just playing like 2 hours of dark techno, and they're like, we have Saudi Prince here and he wants to hear some stuff with words in it. And Joel's like, I'll give you words. Fuck. And so that I think he realized at a certain point, I should, I don't know, maybe it was done from a management point of view or something. I think it was just Joel. Everything's really Joel's impetus. But I think he's like, okay, if I want to do the really dark techno thing, I should give that its own name. That way people know what they're getting. They're not going to expect a mouse head and they're not going to expect ghosts and stuff and stuff. So
Gotcha.
Test Pilot is Joel. And then there's obviously the musical outlet too in that, where he's making music that more fits into that scheme of things. So it makes sense to have multiple aliases when you see that there's sort of multiple art outlets, right? Like I'd love to be like the idealistic, naive person and just say, oh, you can do what you want and people will love you and you don't have to think about anything. But in reality, I think there is a certain, people have expectations based on your previous output, or people have expectations based on what they think you are.
Well, yeah, I mean, how you package something up to somebody and give it to them is like very important. And I mean, a good example of this is with food, right? Like if you give somebody, for instance, yesterday I was eating vegetarian chicken tenders and I was eating them with a friend and he was like, I don't really like this, but if they had given it to me as fried tofu, I'd probably be like, this is great fried tofu. But because they gave it to me as a chicken tender, it tastes nothing like chicken. It tastes like flavorless as fuck. Like this is not, I don't feel good about this,
I've had this exact thought your friend had. Exactly. It drives me crazy when they try to make fake meat, like convince you. I mean, granted, they've done a good job with the Impossible burgers and stuff like that, but it's a burger. It's not saying like steak.
Right.
Exactly. Don't try to pretend you're something you're not.
Yeah, I understand that. So I can understand if Joel gets booked for a Deadmau5 set and then comes out and plays 2 hours of industrial techno or something, then people are going to be pretty unimpressed with that. Yeah,
the audience might be disappointed. The promoter is probably disappointed. And similar to your the food analogy, similarly is like, say like Coca-Cola, right? Like if you're, I can't drink Coca-Cola anymore for whatever reason, but if you, order a Coke, it's like you're ordering it because you expect a certain consistency. You kind of know what you're getting. And if it was like grape flavored or something, you'd be like, what the hell? And send it back or whatever, right? So I think, unfortunately, people think of artists as the same thing. And that's obviously, I'm sure you've seen people struggle with that when they make music that's outside of their genre. And people, this isn't dubstep. What the fuck is this trash? Because people don't really have an open mind. They expect that consistency from that person. So it really is better in a certain way to start a new alias. And then people go, oh no, but my brand, it's not going to, I'm not going to get the same success from it if I start a new name. Well, maybe you'll get more success than you ever had from your last one. Or that, you'll get that cross-pollination from your fans that follow over into it. And I don't know. I kind of think do what's right first and worry about business second. So, I don't know.
Yeah.
And then business, generally money's not a problem if you ignore the idea of making money.
Right. Yeah, like worry about the packaging after you've actually made the art kind of thing. I feel like people understand this food analogy to music subconsciously anyway, because everyone refers to music as like taste, right? They're like, oh, you have like this taste in music kind of thing.
Right.
So it's almost like we use the same, or we do use the same terminology for food and music.
Yeah, I do think that like chef conversations are one of the best analogies to talking about music. It's sort of like you can love a spice, but you can overdo it, and et cetera. It's like you need a sort of balance. Sometimes simple is best. Sometimes things that just enhance the essence of what's there is a lot better than throwing a ton of spice on something. I think there's a lot of analogies with like the way that our olfactory senses work and our auditory sense work that actually make it kind of relevant.
Yeah, that's a good point. Hey man, well, it's been like really awesome talking to you. We've been chatting for like 2 hours now, so it's probably a pretty good place to end it. So people are like
crazy.
Yeah.
I should get to this like list of bugs trying to shore up the ARM version of Serum that's coming up, and it's just crazy to see these new Macs are so crazy fast. It's just like insane, just throwing 100 serums. You're just like watching it. Like,
are you working on
no fans kicking in? You're like, is this real life?
Wow. Are you primarily working on Mac?
Yeah, I prefer Mac a little bit just in terms of, the typical Mac-like interface stuff. And so I do all the development on Xcode on the Mac, and then I'll just do the necessary porting changes over to the PC. And
I've heard
most of my code is really just agnostic. It doesn't I try to stay out of the OS specific stuff as much as possible.
Right. Yeah, I've heard Mac is slightly better for programming because of like the bash terminal and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, it's weird. You talk to different nerds have a different preference there. I mean, there's a lot of plugin devs that do like Visual Studio or one of these other weird IDEs on Windows, but the Unix folk seem to like Mac a little better.
Yeah, it makes sense. Yeah, I guess there's also the other argument from some programmers that Windows is like your only other option outside of Linux and Unix and Mac and all that stuff, which is kind of all based off the same architecture, right?
Yeah, exactly. I don't know. I'm a nerd, but not that kind of nerd is kind of how I think about things. It's like I'm a music nerd and a synth nerd, and like the real nerdy stuff is just a necessary thing to get what I want accomplished. But
yeah, I'm of the same mindset. I think Joel said this, where he prefers to use a Mac Live because he can get like support from a Genius or get his Mac replaced under insurance really easily on the day of a show if he needs to or whatever, but prefers to use a PC in the studio because you get to pick all of your I/O and like get to really customize your build for what you want to do in the studio. And if your computer crashes in the studio, it's not the biggest deal. You might lose one studio day,
Yeah, he's always been a PC guy to start with, and when I really got into it, I had both going. So I had like Mac and a PC with so I just have the best of both worlds because there was a lot of plugins that were just either or, and it's like I want all the toys. So I synced the two machines with digital I/O, 16-channel light pipe between them and everything, so I could just have everything. And I'd use the Mac as the tape deck and the PC more like the instrument because there was a lot more kind of like creative stuff at a certain point there. Long time ago, 20 years ago, there was a lot of creative stuff that only existed on Windows, whether it was freeware or some obscure granular thing or whatever. And now it's like there's so much great stuff on either that's like talking about OS is just, it's kind of a bore, right? You're almost like, dude, who cares?
Yeah, same as DAWs, right?
Yeah, no, but yeah, it makes sense. Macs are just a little more uniform, right? You just know that like the Coca-Cola or whatever, you go buy a Mac, it's like, you don't have to worry about all the configuration or particulars. Just do that, install live, just click, 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 and now you can get to your show. So I do think it makes sense.
Yeah, totally. All right, man. Well, yeah, thanks a lot for chatting and taking 2 hours out of your day to do this on such short notice. That was really cool of you.
Yeah, it was my pleasure. It was great to meet you and finally connect. Let's chat soon.
Yeah, 100%, man. All right, have a good one.
Awesome. You too.
Hey, thanks for listening to the Mr. Bill podcast. These episodes are edited and uploaded twice a week by Robert Fumo of 303podpro.com. You can also support the show, get early access to episodes, and hear bonus content by going to patreon.com/Mr. Bill's Tunes and becoming a patron. Please rate and review on iTunes unless you're going to be a little shit about it. And all the links to my various platforms are at MrBillsTunes.com. Thank you.